It is Monday night, guys. Welcome to Generational Change. I am Peter, and I am still solo, but only for one more week. Hope you're all doing well this evening. And if you are here, and one thing that allowed our live stream on Saturday night to get off to such a great start was because everyone smashed that like button very, very quickly. So I would ask each and every one of you to please do the same. Let's get this out there to as many people as possible. I'm not expecting us to get numbers like we did Saturday night, but maybe you'll all surprise me. You never know. So hope you're all doing well. And as you know, since Jen has been on her sabbatical in the land of the Irish and having a wonderful time there, I have been having guest hosts. And of course, some of those guest hosts are regulars on our show. And one of those regulars is somebody who we consider a friend, and also somebody who's been with us, pretty much through a lot of this growth phase that we have gone on. Steve was actually somebody who, to his credit, would actually bring in a pretty decent sized crowd for us when we were very small, but mighty. We're still small but mighty. We're still growing. But Steve was somebody who has a great following of his own through Real Progressives. And when we would cross-pollinate, as Jen likes to say, he would come on board. And the next thing you know, our numbers would sometimes double or even triple, which is amazing. And so we can never forget those that have helped us get to where we are. And so this evening, we are going to have a wonderful conversation with our good friend over at the Real Progressives, as well as the host of the Macro and Cheese podcast, Steve Grumbine. Welcome back, as always, to Generational Change.
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me, buddy.
Just hoping that as much as I never thought that we would be faced with asking ourselves if Donald Trump will do the right thing, I guess that's what we're hoping for at this point. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there, man. Everything to me is like watching like a lie and trying to decipher the lies, and also swimming upstream against salmon that are determined to consume the lie and believe the lie and repeat the lie. So it's a weird kind of moment in time to be alive, really, to be fair. I mean, I'm 56 years old, an old fart, and I've never seen the kind of lying, bold-faced lying that passes as truth for people in my life ever. I literally have never seen it before. So
yeah, I feel the same. I'm not deterred, but I think I've accepted the fact that we have to deal with a very easily influenced population. The tribalism is very real. But what I will say, and I'm sure you've observed as well, and we're going to get into it not just tonight, but on Thursday too, it does seem that there are significant cracks in the armor amongst the MAGA base. It does seem that there isn't this, I wouldn't say that the fealty towards Trump isn't still very strong. It certainly is. But I do think that there is definitely a break from Israel, which is obviously a great thing. And I think without question that there is a reason why these individuals, in particular ones that identify as MAGA, have been very loud about, well, we have to support Israel and this and that. And obviously we are seeing the pushback in a very substantial way from a substantial portion of the MAGA movement as well. So I came across this document a little earlier this afternoon, and I think this explains a lot as to why we are facing what we're facing right now. So I am not familiar with the JIDF. I know the IDF, but the JIDF, I believe, is some type of an organization that promotes, if you will, pro-Israel messaging on social media. And so I know that the font is a little small, guys, but if you take a gander at what we're looking at here, basically what ends up happening for a lot of these accounts is they end up getting paid, and as you can see, in some cases, in a very substantial way by the pro-Israel lobby to basically push a pro-Israel message on social media. So when you're seeing accounts saying, let's go to war against Iran, the Israel has the right to defend itself, it's really Hamas, it's not the Palestinians that are the problem, et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to see how these types of accounts pop up. And we know, we've seen the footage, we've seen the videos, we know the people that have done it just for political purposes, whether through Palantir, whether through Cambridge Analytica. There's a lot of these different, private organizations that will pay people to push a certain agenda. So is it really a stretch, Steve, that we are seeing people push an agenda for World War III, dare I say, because that is very possible in this moment, all for the purpose of making a few extra shekels? Just a thought.
Nah, man, that seems to be the name of the game. See, when you atomize people and you privatize things and you make it all about the individual and their success or their failure, and it's all on them. This is the libertarian mindset. It's all about you. It's coercion to help people. It's we gotta all be like individuals. And if I make a good investment and I become a millionaire, that's because I'm a great person. I did great things. Your failure makes you your failure. And so you get shit like this jittif crap. And that's why I am an avowed socialist and an MMTer, because I want to collectivize. I want everyone to succeed, and I want people to thrive and survive without having to make compromising shit decisions like this, because we've atomized society. I mean, this is a direct relationship to atomizing society by creating the me, myself, and I, what's in it for me world. You get a jittif, and wow, oh wow, that was an eye opener, man. I didn't want to see it, but I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, I think we all need to see it. And I think people need to realize that just about everybody out there who's pushing this agenda on Israel's behalf, yeah, I'm not saying everybody's getting paid, but a lot of them are getting paid. And hey, listen, please comment, because all you're doing is helping our channel. So if you want to troll, you want to tell us how much you hate us, that's great. Keep doing it. More people will see our channel. And the ratio here suggests that you're outnumbered about 100 to 1. So that's probably reflective of where a lot of the politics is in this country. The numbers are so overwhelmingly against Israel, and yet what we are dealing with here is the greater problem, which is our system, our country has been captured by corporate special interests, and the Israel lobby has a lot to do with that. They play a substantial role.
Absolutely, man. No question about it. I mean, when you look at everything that our country does, and you can, I mean, seriously, like if you go back to our founding documents, and I challenge everybody that just supports the troops and talks about the Constitution and all that stuff, if you go back and you realize our Constitution was literally written by wealthy white slave owners. And it was not written on behalf of all the poor people and the low and the downtrodden. It was written literally for those wealthy people to retain their possessions, to protect private property, and to ensure that they had a police force, if you will, by law, to guard the rich who were hoarding things away from the people who were dying and starving. So naturally, when you look at what our country was founded on, and you look at the lies that we've been fed since the dawn of, the colonizing project that we call the United States, it's been set up this way. We've been conditioned from day one to cheer for the flag that represents the red, white, and blue in all of us, while simultaneously atomizing each individual and saying, if you do well, it's all your good. If you do badly, well, it's all your problem. It's your fault. You should have been born by a better family. Your family should have had more money. How dare you say you have a claim on my money? Stop hating. Stop being jealous of me, right? Somebody who was born on third acting like they hit a triple. So I think this entire mindset that leads to this stuff goes back, I mean, like I know for sure in this country, to the founding documents, and all of our laws and everything else that sets this country up are founded on defending that concept.
The concept of, I guess, the austerity mindset has fully seeped into a substantial portion of the population. And I do believe that a lot of people in this country are under the illusion, because that's what it really is. They're under this illusion that it's kill or be killed. If I'm going to succeed, somebody else is going to have to fail. So I don't have any sympathy for somebody who ends up falling through the cracks while I'm ascending up the next rung on the ladder. I do think that has, if there is a successful component of austerity politics, it is that mindset. I'm not going to say that that's the overwhelming majority mindset, but it's definitely a mindset nonetheless that has overtaken a substantial portion of the population.
Well, going back to my readings of Ayn Rand as a young libertarian many, many moons ago, reading The Fountainhead, reading, Atlas Shrugged, reading all these different writings of Ayn Rand, the core theme of all of her writing is there are makers and there are takers. And that mindset used to be for the, incel community, but now it's somehow or another creeped into progressive world. It's creeped into other groups little by little, people that don't have a deep theoretical understanding of power and working class consciousness. And they get swept away with this stuff. And you read, where's John Galt? Who's John Galt? Blah, blah, blah. And you start realizing that there is a true group of people out there who thinks that everything that they do is theirs for the taking. And who are you to tell me I can't accumulate and acquire everything by hook or by crook? Get out of my way. If you're not smart enough to defeat me, then you're a loser and you should die and fuck you. And, and let me set up a warlord status so I can be king libertarian. And this has become, you go back to the 60s with, all the Mount Pelerin Society and the Chicago School and Milton Friedman and the rest of them, the Powell memo later. We have been priming this pump for a long time. What you're seeing today with Project 25 and the rest of it isn't something new. This is the culmination of many, many years of libertarian Austrian logic penetrating the halls of justice around the country and penetrating the world at large. And I would say the U.S. has become the single largest libertarian experiment in the world. And I would say the vast majority of people are very, very miserable. Yeah, there's a few people out there saying, speak for yourself. Well, I will. I've got an education, I've got a career, blah, blah, blah. And I can assuredly tell you that I can see the suffering without having to experience it, even though I am experiencing it, right? You think about this, the whole fucking country is under a mass psychosis of literal propaganda. It's baked into our sitcoms, baked into everything. And they get it reinforced at church, reinforced on the news, reinforced with alt media, people equivocating, not pulling for the collective, always going for the individual. And we get rocks, we get so excited when we find somebody that's going to go down for the count. We want to talk about who the bad guy was, and we would talk about who the good guy was. And instead of looking at it like we win and we lose collectively, which would really fix a great many problems, including our ability to organize and actually have power. We're atomized to the point where we don't stand a chance unless we fix it.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing about working collectively together. If we do not work collectively together, we will not stop Israel's complete takeover of our country. They're already there, but they could very well drag us into World War III. And if we try to tackle this as individuals, we will lose. If we tackle this as the United States of America, we might have a chance. And that's the type of mindset that I think needs to kind of permeate through all different aspects of our society. Right now, that's not happening. And what we collectively must do is expose organizations like the JIDF that trust none of what you see and less of what you hear, and recognize that our fight is predicated on this idea that we can have things that all of the developed nations that care about their people do have. We have been played for fools for far too long, but Mark Twain often said, it is easier to fool a person than to convince them that they're being fooled. Now, I think it's a lot harder to fool people in this day and age because I think most people are starting to suffer under the boot of the broken capitalist system. You cannot get to this point where very few in the population are actually succeeding within this system, and the overwhelming majority of people are failing. I think that that in itself is a huge part of it. And I also think that that is a huge part of why, even though electoral politics is not really our bag, but, you know, we pay attention to specific elections if they have some validity. And that, of course, is the election with Zohran Mamdani, who does have a realistic chance of becoming the next mayor of New York City. Under normal circumstances, I don't think that that would be happening. Despite the fact I think he's run a great campaign. I think he's a very solid candidate, and I think he has an excellent chance of pulling this off, not just because of how much of a strong coalition he's built, but obviously he is running against Andrew Cuomo, and there's really nothing to like about this guy. You know, he's selling the worst type of corporatism in all of politics, and he's a big grab ass and all that stuff. So maybe he's going to lose. At least I hope he does. I'm not convinced yet that he's going to, even though the trend suggests that a guy who is not just, a person of color and a Muslim, but he's an avowed socialist. And he's, according to polls, not by a lot, but by enough to suggest that he's in the lead. That's something that I think, because of the shifts that we have been seeing consistently, is a huge reason why a week from tomorrow, he might become the next mayor. And I do think that it'll in some ways create this illusion that there's hope for not just electoral politics, but the Democratic Party, both of which are not true. However, do I think that politics matter at the local level, even as a city as big as New York? Absolutely. I do think that there are things, as the chief executive of a major city, he would have the opportunity to at least try to push through, and we'll see what type of coalition he could build. But for somebody to be as adamantly against Israel as he is, and to have a chance to win in a city like New York, I really do believe it would reverberate in a very substantial way if he's able to do it.
I don't have a whole lot to say about that race. I am not from New York, and I don't follow it very much, and I tend to I've read different things about his quote unquote feelings toward Israel, and they didn't give me a warm fuzzy. And if you're telling me that he's adamantly opposed, I'm going to have to trust your judgment, because I assume you follow it far closer than I do.
I would say if you're running in New York City and you're talking the way he's talking, that is as against Israel as you could possibly. And that is, I mean, you're talking about, the Yenta privileged mamas coming up to him on the street saying, "You don't support Israel." And it's like, all right, well, you dude, if you're going for it, you're going. And he's unapologetic about it. That's what makes it even better. He's like, no, I love Israel. He's like, that's, if nothing else, I think it's proof, as it should be for anybody, that collectively, even outside of electoral politics, that we can make this happen. But the reason I bring him up is because clearly the establishment is very concerned about the prospect of him winning. And I bring that up because the New York Times, of course, decided that a few months ago, they announced that they were no longer making endorsements in local elections. They've made an exception to denounce Zohran Mamdani and endorse grandma slayer, alleged sex criminal, and suburban thug Andrew Cuomo. And this is what they had to say. Unfortunately, Mr. Mamdani is running on an agenda uniquely unsuited to the city's challenges. He's a democratic socialist who too often ignores the unavoidable trade-offs of governance. Could you just say bribes? Could you just say quid pro quos? When you say trade-offs, you're trying to make it sound sexy. You're trying to make it sound attractive. But in reality, you're just hiding the fact that it's pure corruption, that he doesn't want to play in that sandbox. And if there's one thing we know about Andrew Cuomo, and especially because he is an opportunity to get back into power, could you even imagine the type of backroom deals that guy is making? The type of quid pro quo deals that he's making to get back into power after everything that he did, from how he handled COVID to how he deals with women to how he was blocking any type of populist legislation in Albany. I mean, could you imagine the type of shit he's had to do? And now he's got the New York Times basically simping for his ass. And it's just so transparently corrupt as far as I can see.
Well, if you read that closely, you realize you're dealing with the YIMBYs. And the Yimbys are a particularly pernicious brand of evil. You know, I want you to think about this, right? If your goal is to make housing available for all, we always forget this because it's convenient to forget this. And when I say we forget this, I mean we all forget that. Not folks that run in my circle, but the people that don't run in my circle, that stay in other circles. The federal government, if its goal was to provide houses for all, could literally choose to provide houses, could buy up plots of land, could use eminent domain, buy up plots of land, buy up houses that are being squatted on, could do whatever, build great, wonderful, non-crappy public housing across the country without any effort whatsoever. And with the climate crisis, most of the jobs that we do today in this country, save for industrial labor and factory work, can be done remotely. There's no need for a car to put fuel out there, emissions into the air. There's no reason for a person to have to commute. They could live outside the city, work in the city, and telework. There's no reason they couldn't do that. Even in public housing, they could make it so people could do that. No, not all people are great at doing this, but then again, what is anybody all great at, right? But we choose to think that we have to let the markets figure it out. And if you read the bullshit they're talking about, they're literally trying to make this YIMBY thing a thing. And it's across the country. And unfortunately, even groups like DSA have allowed the YIMBYs to kind of have a platform. And YIMBYs are the ultimate in right-wing kind of, abundance types. These are the abundance people, the new abundance flavor that is nothing but Ronald Reagan deregulation. Obviously, regulating rent is regulation. We want to get rid of that. We want to make it good for developers. We want to make it good for investors. Why not eliminate the ability of BlackRock and others to buy up these properties? Why not pass a law? You can pass a law doing that just the same, right? There's nothing preventing it other than that's not what our government is there for. Our government simps for capital. It is, and go back to my opening statements, going back to the founding documents. It's always been about private property, protecting private property, protecting private wealth. And so what is eliminating rent, capping rent and literally getting rid of that disgraceful YIMBY mindset? Instead of envisioning a more robust public sector that the federal government funds the state or enables them, because the federal government being the currency issuer can do whatever the fuck it wants. Why not do that? Well, because that is not going to be the most profitable way for the rich to get richer. And what do they want? They want to accumulate. So I'm not here to simp for Mamdani. I don't know anything about him. I really do. I know just enough to say, okay, I see people want him. I'm not in that district. I don't have to worry about it. But when you look at what's being done there, understanding the YIMBY mindset is to understand the devil, to understand Reagan taking over the Democratic Party worse than it already did.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's even more telling, and Colin, if you could pull up that image that I just sent over to you again, they took out this article in the New York Times. They took out a full-page ad saying that a rent freeze is bad for renters. No, a rent freeze is bad. It's not even necessarily bad for entrepreneurs. It's bad for corporate landlords. That's who it's bad for. And I know who these people are because I'm in this world. It's what I do. And so I can assure you guys that it's all about capital, pure and simple. It doesn't matter how detestable Andrew Cuomo is or how likable Zohran Mamdani is. What matters is that one person is going to do everything in their power to protect corporate special interests, and the other person is going to try to make it a more even playing field. And he's not even asking for that much, but just even something around the margins, something as simple as a rent freeze for what will probably amount to a short period anyway, maybe 6 months to a year, whatever it would look like. But even something as simple as that, I think the reason that this is such a precarious problem is that I think that there's enough cracks in the armor right now that they realize that if they even allow a slight tweak, especially in a place like New York, it could reverberate in substantial ways. But I think that that's also the problem with the system itself, is that it's cratering in so many ways. Like, people have to know that the average person cannot afford this anymore. And you're seeing the commentary from a lot of different people who perhaps their tune just a few years ago wouldn't have been anything even close to something like that. Only now they're starting to see the truth about how things really are. They're recognizing that there's a reason you cannot afford to live in these places, because the people who actually own these buildings, they don't care about the people who live there. They just care about the bottom line. Frankly, most of them don't even live in the area. They live somewhere completely different. We know that the Zionists in particular, the ones who own the buildings all over New York City that are basically slumlord paradises, if you will, they're living in Miami Beach and places like that. They don't give a damn about these people at all. And if somebody like Mamdani is going to come in there and make some type of an impact, however peripheral or small it may be, just to give people some semblance of hope, the powers that be don't want it. They don't care. And they're going so far as to say, we will put Andrew fucking Cuomo back in power because he plays ball. That's it. There's no magical why don't people like Zohran? Because Zohran doesn't like corporate special interests. That's it. Everything else, forget it. It doesn't mean it. Nothing else matters. This is it.
Agreed. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what I think is interesting, because you're in this business, right?
Sure.
See, I would eliminate the rentier class altogether if I had a choice. I would just eliminate it.
I think that
I would eliminate.
No, I think that there's value in responsible ownership. But the problem is that we don't have responsible ownership. We have predatory ownership, and there is a difference. There's a significant difference. There are people who actually think that there's a justification for people to pay $3,000 a month to live in a broom closet. Like, they think, somebody's willing to pay for it. Hey, it's not my problem. I'm making the money.
It's capitalism, right? Yeah. I'm an avowed socialist. So if you think about the difference between what I'm saying and maybe what you're saying, I'm a socialist. I'm not here to make somebody rich. I'm here to get the workers and the people to have homes and jobs and ownership of their world, ownership of their own decisions, but as a collective, right? To produce the kind of outcomes that help everyone, not just somebody that made a really good investment, right? My goal here in this world is to look out for all, not to enable somebody to get rich. So, because, think about this. If everybody's rich, nobody's rich, right? The way rich people judge themselves is by the distance between them and the next person. That's right. And I think that mindset is a cancer, right? I would eliminate that. I would make it so that that's not a thing. And, obviously human beings want what they want. But when you say, this is what you can do, and this is how you can do it, because it's not just about what you want, it's about what's good for all, right? Like, think about this. I talked to a really, really phenomenal physicist who understands economics and understands the environment, and at a molecular level understands, everything's emanating from the sun down to the soil, through the water, to you name it. And when you think about how connected everything is, to be atomized and to think that you are the be all end all of your own little world and that what matters is you win, is so fundamentally fucked and wrong. If you just understand that, like, for example, one of my favorite stories he told was in the Netherlands. They had this really, really booming industry for the crops. They were like, how in the world are you growing so much on such a small piece of land? And what they found is that the fertilizers and stuff that they were using were incredible, and it created these robust crops. But guess what happens? It seeps into the soil. It creates drainage that runs off into the waterways, that creates algae blooms, and all of a sudden creates completely dead zones that are never going to be fertilizable again for who knows how long, right? And so the people downstream have to deal with the Clive and Bundy method. They have to deal with what happened upstream. Mm-hmm. So when you don't understand the connectedness of all things, you do things extraordinarily selfishly. So from my vantage point, and don't get me wrong, dude, I used to be a libertarian. So it's not like this is something that I'm a lifelong guy that thinks this way. I came to this very, very hard knocks route, man, having to learn and bump the shit out of my head. And so from my vantage point, if you think about where I'm coming from, sure, I want to lead a happy, healthy life. I want my kids to be living in a world where they don't have to worry about stupid things that they shouldn't have to worry about. I don't want them swallowing debt because the world is trying to privatize the commons so that we're all stuck paying even more debt. I don't want that for them, but that's what this kind of atomization does. And that's, I feel like I got to live forever to protect my children. And I can't even protect myself right now. That's how bad it is. So I would proffer up that, yes, sure, a couple people making out big on some good investments and stuff like that may feel good. But in the end, it's a model. It's a business model that predates on people, whether or not one or two good people do it. The problem is that all the others, and what you've seen is the gross mismanagement of this by having BlackRock buy up all the stuff. So in the end, in my opinion, and it is my opinion, but it's an opinion shared by a few people, I think, out there. Sure. We need to be looking at building a public commons, not building private wealth. And that's a tough pill to swallow for some that have eaten the USA's rhetoric for the last 300 years or so.
Yeah, it's a tough go around. One thing I just wanted to point out is that early voting did, in fact, begin today in the mayoral race. And with the looks of the numbers so far, they do seem to be very favorable towards Zohran. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, look, the one thing you also have to remember, Steve, is that a lot of people are very, I don't want to say everybody's depressed necessarily, but, a lot of people are really down in the dumps about the system in so many ways. So, perhaps a nice little shot in the arm might be good. I mean, all of it is for naught if, somehow we get dragged or into war with Iran.
Do you think we get dragged? Or, just curious. Do you think we're getting dragged, or do you think we're like literally in each other's back pocket? My guess is, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am because Trump came out and said it. He literally slow played Iran into believing there was a nuclear proliferation while they were feeding Israel everything they needed to do this launch of this war. I mean, this is a truly a U.S. driven thing. It's not the other way around. I think it's like in complete cahoots. I don't see us being the poor wimpy empire that just bent to knee to Netanyahu.
I don't. Here's the thing, and I don't agree with you, Mo. I don't think Zionism is here to stay at all. I actually think it is on its way out, but it's going to go through. Again, it's going to reach its apex, which it's trying to do right now. Here's the thing: no matter what happens with Iran, Zionism is dying in the United States, and everyone knows it because people can see the pure hatred that people have for the state of Israel. And no matter how much the Zionists scream from the rooftops that this is all anti-Semitism, people just don't care anymore. They just don't care. They're like, call me whatever the fuck you want. I see right through you, and you're not selling me on this. And now that we've already shown that some of those wonderful accounts online led by the psychopaths like Laura Loomers of the world, they're getting paid to talk like this. No one just, I mean, yes, are there true believers? Maybe. They still exist, but overwhelmingly, everyone's just got their hands out. They just want to get paid. Everyone knows that the Treasury is getting looted right now. You've got insider trading that is just done in full view of the public, and nothing happens to these people. Nothing. In fact, it's encouraged. We now have a Nancy Pelosi stock tracker, channel on Twitter that's blown up that people just follow. And I'm thinking, how does anybody trust the rule of law? You can't trust the rule of law because this is what happened when everybody was going after Trump. And I'm thinking, yeah, Trump does a lot of bad shit, but he's doing a lot of bad shit that everybody else is doing. And everyone just wants to point the finger at him like he's the guilty party. No, you all fucking suck. You're all on the inside. You're all playing us for fools. And as I've been saying quite a bit lately, Lincoln's greatest saying, you can fool some of the people all the time. You can fool all the people some of the time. You cannot fool all the people all of the time. And we're in that stage now where they've played this game one too many times. We're seeing it right now with Iran. They're doing the same exact playbook that they did with Iraq. It's the same fucking thing. Nothing's changed. It's amazing how they're just simply incapable, or maybe that's hubris on their part because they're so convinced that Americans are dumb as fuck and that they will believe anything, that we'll just repeat the same thing over and over again. There is no need for us to shift our rhetoric. We just need to continue saying what we're saying.
I think if you look, one more thing about this that I think is really important to realize is most Zionists out here are not Jewish at all. They're Christians. And these Christians are in these huge mega churches, donating huge amounts of money to some other dude, going on sojourns to Israel constantly. And this has become a thing. This is a real thing. I mean, like you need to understand that a huge cadre of Trump's support, and again, I'm not an electoralist, so this is just me categorizing where they fit ideologically. These folks genuinely believe in, all the stories of Zionism, all the rights. We need to be over, because this is where, when Christ comes back, to take on Armageddon, we're gonna have the battle, the end days, and all this stuff. They're true believers, brother. I have friends going back to my days when I was in that world that still text me on Father's Day or birthdays and stuff, and out of nowhere it's like, Steve, you better try and get yourself a passport so you can get out of the country, so you can go to Israel, because blah blah blah, you really want to do this. I'm like, wait a minute, man, we have not talked enough in the last decade. You don't know me. You don't know me. And but it's just this is taught in these churches, man. They're Jews for Jesus coming in there and talking to them. There's a Campus Crusade. There's all these groups that pump this stuff down. And I had both. Let me just say this: I had a wonderful experience, and in a retrospect, a cursed experience with one of my former pastors, who was a Messianic Jew, who taught us everything from the Passover Seders to the history and the way the two work together. And I got to sit at the table and watch firsthand how many of these Christians are part of this that have nothing to do with Judaism at all. Zionism isn't Judaism. It's its own thing. And it is large and in charge. And right now it's got the ear of the White House, and the White House, whether or not the White House is different than Pelosi. We obviously know Pelosi and the rest of this is an oligarch thing. This is the Republicans do things that the Democrats couldn't get away with, and the Democrats return the favor and do things that the Republicans can't do. And it's all about which of those things the oligarchy wants done. It has nothing to do with us. It's about manufacturing consent amongst us to agree. And unfortunately, I had my, I'm not going to mention, I should, but it's family that came to me with this, and it broke my heart. They were concerned about some of my posts on social media. Ooh. That I wasn't being a good Christian, that I wasn't elevating the Lord, that I was, maybe my walk had suffered in some way, shape, or form. And it broke my heart because, for me, my faith comes out of recovery from alcoholism. Okay. My association with Christianity came about as a last ditch attempt to save myself from drinking myself to oblivion. So when I think about this stuff, I have a totally different, I don't look at Republican Jesus. I'm like the Christian left, if there is such a thing. And I know there is, by the way. And when you think about it, my flipping of the tables in the temple, and flipping the bankers' tables over and the money changers' tables over, that's who I am. And I'm always looking at them, drawing in the sand, looking out for he without sin cast the first stone kind of stuff. So I'm looking out for the little guy. And I was just kind of blown away that was the feedback, that somehow or another my walk wasn't measuring up, and they were concerned. And this person whom I love to death and would die for, literally, it just was kind of mind-blowing to me how under control they are of kind of right-wing forces that are, I think, polluting their brain, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's also a fear factor in many ways. I mean, you see how the Zionists are indoctrinated from a very early age. They turn these people into psychopaths. I mean, that's what they do. And look, when you have as truly bigoted an ideology as Zionism is, and it is as clear, I mean, you know where I stand. I think a lot of the stuff that people talk about where everybody's a racist and have been all that bullshit, I think it's completely overblown. But when it comes to something like Zionism, there is no gray area. It is very clear cut. They are as true to the word of what true bigoted racism really is. They feel that they are ethnically, culturally, religiously, and spiritually superior to everyone that is not them, and even to the people that subscribe to their ideals. Unless there is, it's sort of like this pure blood, if you will. Like you have to be pure white. Well, you have to be pure Jewish in order to be accepted. We might accept you as Christian Zionists, but you'll never be the chosen people.
Yep.
This is instilled in people's brains during very crucial periods in people's lives. And they talk about how the toddlers are taught that the Palestinians are evil and that we have to avoid them at all costs, or we're going to suffer this incredible, destruction of our people. And so while that has wrapped people up so tightly, it is now coming to a head. If it ever was, it's coming to a head right now. And this was pointed out by a number of people. And I think it is crucial here that we understand that language does have consequences. I think people tend to forget that sometimes. But there is no joking and no messing around here when it comes to this particular state. This particular state believes, kind of like we would joke about Sarah Palin when she was on stage and says, I believe that Jesus is coming back during my lifetime. And we all had a nice little laugh about that at the time. But these particular people really are under the illusion that bringing about the destruction of mankind is actually a good thing, that it fulfills their so-called prophecy. Hence why we see people online constantly talk about, well, this is what God says. Well, Phil Girardi used to be one of the heads of the CIA. And this is what he said, I believe, earlier today.
The United States goes to war with Iran in the near future. It will not be because Tehran actually threatens America. It will be because Israel and its powerful lobby in the U.S. have succeeded in creating an essentially false casus belli to mandate such action. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who once commented that 9/11 was good for Israel, has repeatedly sought to commit our government to draw red lines that would narrow options for the White House and de facto require it to take action with the military against Iran. I also would not doubt that Israel, accustomed to behaving with impunity towards its alleged friend and patron in Washington, might manufacture a pretext to draw the U.S. into a new conflict. Something reminiscent of the Lavon affair in Alexandria, Egypt in 1954, or the false flag attack on the USS Liberty in 1967.
Let's never forget the USS Liberty. That is the only maritime attack, unprovoked attack, on an American ship, and the only time we didn't respond. And we all know why. We wanted to respond, but perhaps the biggest Zionist president we've ever had, LBJ, decided that we must sweep it under the rug. This is why, again, people tend to get conspiratorial about, Kennedy's assassination. I'm not conspiratorial. I just follow the evidence. I follow the evidence when I look at somebody like JFK, who was not playing ball with the Zionist state, and LBJ was all the more willing to play ball. How do when people say, that's not true, you don't know this, you don't know that. You don't know a single person who works for the NSA. You don't know a single person who works for the CIA. You don't know any of these people. You know why? Because they're plainclothes people walking around every day. Somebody that is in your neighborhood could very well be a spook, and you don't even know it. So don't talk about, oh, well, this person do that. No. But if the evidence is suggesting that this is what's actually going on, and that you go from one president who's one way to Israel and another president who's a completely different way, then who's to say that there weren't those conversations of, maybe we need to get rid of this guy? Make it look like an accident. You know what I'm talking about? Say that some patsy took care of him. That'll be the end of it. But this is big business. If you are an investor in a multifamily building, let's say in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, near where Steve is, or in Pensacola, Florida, which is where I am. If you knew as a corporate investor that the old building that you have was suffering from some form of asbestos, and that you really needed to completely open up, the walls in the building and update all of the pipes and the windows and all of the insulation and all that stuff. And that's going to cost you a significant amount of money. Or you could keep your mouth shut about it, perhaps get your tenants very sick, and eventually some of them are going to die. But in the process, you're going to make more money. You mean to tell me that that's not something that isn't a common practice here in the United States? And that it isn't a common practice when it comes to something like the state of Israel? That everything is interrelated to money and power, and that people are willing to kill people for the...
Uh-oh.
At least I think that that's the impetus of the problem at the moment. But
well, let me bring this up, because I in grad school we went through this really cool book by Arthur Miller, who was married to Marilyn Monroe, and the book was called All My Sons, I believe it was. And what it talked about was this family who owned a business that built planes during the wartime. And they found a problem with one of the parts that they had manufactured. And all of a sudden, planes were going down in the war. And they found out, hey, we have a defective part. I had to make a choice. We can either fall on the sword and tell everyone, oh my God, we're so sorry, we've built this faulty part, we've got to recall those deaths are on us. And they figured out that the cost of saying, oops, I'm sorry, and paying for it, but keeping the faulty part in place was more cost beneficial to them than to do the right thing. And when your legal system is set up to allow that, to make that the way it is, when your country is founded on documents that support the pursuit of wealth and private property, that's what you're going to get as well. And we did a Law and Order type play to kind of go through the whole back and forth in the process. And it was interesting to see people who would identify as investors and capitalists suddenly find a moral compass as they role played through this action and going through line by line what Arthur Miller put out there. And you think about it, we all can say these things, but when push comes to shove, we're always seemingly willing to fall back on, quote unquote, the lesser evil. We're always willing to try to maximize our return, whether or not it's the right thing to do or not. And part of that is the manufactured scarcity that we see. So people are chasing after trying to get things, etc. But beyond that, I think it's just important to shine a light on this kind of shit, dude, because our society as a whole, we don't have a lot of control up above. But what we do have a lot of control of is how we interact with one another. And if we talk to one another and we organize together. But part of the problem is that you've got to want collective solutions, to have collective action for collective solutions. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that have wanted to organize were there for collective solution, for collective action, but for personal gain, as opposed to the other way around. And I think that right there is a fundamental flaw, that in order for us to ever change any of these sorts of things, and I don't think we're going to be able to, be honest with you. I think that we literally are going to require a revolution. I don't believe that this is something that we can incrementally do shit about at all. And I don't say that with any great joy whatsoever. In fact, I say that with absolute terror in my heart. But I believe beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is no way to stop what's happening today without a real, honest to God, countervailing force, a real dual power that can literally cause them to question everything, cause them to fear us. But as you see, all it takes is the slightest bit of pushback, and they will send the jackboots out there. They will send the billy clubs and the militarized police out there to prevent these sorts of things. But Peter, I mean, look at the world around us. What choice do we have? What choices do we have, for real?
No, but there are enough people that are starting to look at it that way, which is why I accept the fact that there are people that I will not do business with, because I have a moral compass. I can't not live with myself if I do things that I know are going to hurt, for not just the Palestinian people. I mean, I've cut off all Israelis from my network, all of them. And I don't waste my time. In fact, a couple of the listings I have right now, and the one thing I will tell you that is at least somewhat of a relief is that in the commercial real estate space, the Zionists pretty much stick exclusively to multifamily properties. So when that happens and they're interested, like, I just don't respond. I'm like, go find somebody else to do business with. Somebody else probably will, because somebody else is more concerned about their bottom line than they are about their moral compass. For me, if it hurts my business, and so be it. But there are certain lines in the sand that we must draw. It's up to us to make those conscious decisions. And we all are capable of doing that. It's like we wake up every day and we decide, am I going to eat a certain way or am I going to exercise a certain way? Those are choices and we can make them. It is easy to get down on ourselves. I get it, because it does seem like our system is failing, which it is. And we do not know what that next step is going to look like. Where are we going? What is that going to be? It is scary times. And everyone, I think, believes to some degree or another that they are living in a unique period in history. But this is a unique period in history. There's no question.
Do you ever see the movie Elysium?
No.
See it sometime, man. It is a really, really good movie. It is about the poors inheriting Earth and the rich living on a manufactured space station with grass and healing stations and everything else, and watching how the rich come down and attack the people, treat them like criminals. They're barely able to breathe. The air is toxic. The water is toxic. There's hardly any food. And without us necessarily leaving the planet, I genuinely see this balkanization that is happening at such an incredibly, fantastically speedy clip that, I mean, they don't care if they destroy this planet. They're busy trying to terraform Mars in their brains, right? They're busy trying to do some sort of reclamation, if you will, of old space ideas, or build bunkers or whatever. They don't mind letting it, as long as they accumulate more and more and more, they see it as inevitable that these things will occur. And quite frankly, none of us really have the wherewithal to survive what they're doing. I think time is really short, Peter. I don't think that we've got lots and lots of time. And I don't know how to make that urgency jump out, but there's an urgency in my soul. Not a lot of tools by which to do anything with at this point, but there's an urgency that I feel for the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep at night. And I think my dreams are haunted by it as well. So,
yeah, I think we're all equally disturbed by what we're seeing right now. And that is, I mean, it's kind of like going up on a roller coaster. And the most scary part about it is the ascension, not the drop. The drop, it's happening, so it's going to happen. I think we're all at this point where we just want the Band-Aid to be ripped off. We're tired of it. We're tired of the manipulation that corporate special interest has over our daily lives. I think people would care a lot less, as fortunate as it is for me to say this, I think people would care a lot less about Iran and, dare I say, even the Palestinian people, if it wasn't for the fact that our government is on its knees every day for the state of Israel. Now, you could say the relationship is one and the same, and I would agree to a major extent it is, but the veil has been removed. And what I would say to people now that are very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East, let me say this. This is the end of the road for the Zionist Israel lobby in the United States. It isn't going to happen today, and it isn't going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen sooner than you think. And the reason I know this is because too many people are now aware of just what level of corruption and control that this very lobby, much like private insurance and big pharma, as well as big oil, have over our country. And let's not forget that a lot of these things are interconnected. It's interconnected with big oil because of the natural gas reserves that are under Gaza's soil to the tune of about $500 billion. You know, kind of like the natural resources that are in Western Ukraine, which started that whole fucking thing a few years ago. Everything is interrelated to corporate special interests. And if you don't realize that the only way out of it is to break this system, there's no other way. And the very people who are controlling it, the billionaires for the longest time never felt the need to get themselves involved in the political arena. But now you know who they are. You know who a lot of them are. You don't know who all of them are. Frankly, you probably don't even know 20% of them. But you know enough of the ones that are there where before, yesteryear, no one knew who any of these people were. Many of them live in obscurity. In fact, you knew about that. I only learned about that that Illinois billionaire, psychopath, conservative nut job that started putting millions of dollars into the Ohio women's reproductive freedom ballot initiative. What the fuck does the guy in Ohio have to do with what's going on in what is in Illinois having to do with Ohio? Nothing. But when you think you're a master of the universe, you do whatever the fuck you want. And who's going to tell you otherwise? You saw how Sam Bankman-Fried, how fast did people drop to their knees for that fucking loser? But because he had money, they couldn't suck him off hard enough.
When you have everything, the only thing you don't have is that God thing. And so they want to be revered. They want to have power. It's not just about stuff anymore. Stuff, they can have anything they want. I mean, it was weird. I was listening to an athlete talking about how much had changed in their life since they had become wealthy. And they're like, and the irony wasn't lost. I wish I could remember which athlete it was, but it's really not.
Before you even say it, I bet that athlete, as much as he enjoys having that money, I'm sure that there's a part of him where his life is even more miserable now than it was before, because everyone wants a fucking piece of him.
Well, it's not just that. It's like so much of what we do is about aspiration. It's about, achieving things and doing things and when you have all of that, it's kind of like, well, what now? What do I do? Right. And just more. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there is an element there, and you can see it in a lot of people. Some you can see them pivot a different way, and philanthropy, as nice as it sounds, is a failure of government, right? It's a failure of government policy, right?
If there is one thing I have learned, if there's one thing I've learned in my world, the world that I run in now, in terms of my career, philanthropy it's a whitewash, is what it is. It's an excuse
exactly
to protect wealth. That's all it is.
Nothing more.
Are there benevolent people? Do they exist? Absolutely. But I can assure you that most benevolent people, at least the ones that I've encountered, are ones that don't have a lot. People that truly care and want to help, those are not people with all the money. The people with all the money are looking at how many different nonprofits can I sink my money into to avoid paying any taxes. I don't have a problem with paying taxes. But
hey, we're a nonprofit. Please send some of that money our way. We won't be bought off by it. But hey, if you're willing, we need it so we can fight you.
I also think, and this is a perfect transition because I know you wanted to get into this tonight. We're going to, and guys, we're going to do a very special segment probably after this topic, which Steve really wanted to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about Ian Carroll and the dissecting of the Bibi files, which you're not going to want to miss that. And very, very poignant stuff. Credit to Candace Owens' channel for getting that out there, because it's very hard to find that information online. They've done a great job of shadow banning all that shit. But nevertheless, I think it is imperative that we talk about this idea. We come full circle to this idea of austerity and how, you constantly hear people that are not even dumb. I wouldn't necessarily even say that they're dumb. I would just say that they're exceptionally misinformed, maybe on purpose. But this whole idea of we're $37 trillion in debt, this country is going to break in about 5 minutes. What the hell are we going to do about this? Now, for those of you who are familiar, we are very selective in the type of content that we like to share on our channel. We don't just put anybody out there. I have been following Moon's content for quite some time. I think he does a pretty decent job. You know, the Brit has some snark and some, I would say, fairly accurate takes on a number of things, but then he doesn't have as accurate a take on everything. And this is a subject matter that is very near and dear to Steve's heart. So we're going to share with you exactly what the truth is regarding this concept of austerity, as well as this idea that the dollar is built on a lie. So, Steve, we're going to start it. We're going to stop it. We're going to have a little fun here, and we're going to enjoy your wisdom on this subject matter.
24 alone, billionaire wealth has surged by $2 trillion. We're going into an age of trillionaires. And since the top 1% have taken nearly 40% of all the wealth in the US, the result is leading to rampant inequality. And with rising debt and a coming economic downturn, this could end up.
Why do they insist on saying that the United States is 36 trillion in debt? And what are they hoping to accomplish by doing it this way?
Well, a couple things, right? Number one, the libertarian mind wants to end the government's ability to have a public anything. They don't like the fact that the government is the currency issuer. They don't like the fact that the government gets to pick and choose what it invests in, who gets money, etc. They don't like that. And so they've, forever have tried to make banks the bigger deal, but more in charge, more involved. So they hype up this concept that the government is 36 trillion in debt. And all that $36 trillion is, if you're a child that understands basic accounting, a child, not an adult, not a college graduate, a child, you understand that there is an asset and a liability on every balance sheet, period. You know that one person's spending is another person's income. And in the government's case, it spends money into existence. So on your balance sheet, when it spends money into existence, it registers what? A liability. Over here, on the other side, is us. Well, not necessarily us. Probably BlackRock, Boeing, Halliburton, any number of huge companies that are on the Tesla, SpaceX, all these different groups get huge public subsidies. And they're not taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry, folks, your taxes didn't do this, but it is our asset on the other side of the ledger. The government is the creator of the currency. We are the users of the currency. The government needs to provision itself. It spends money into existence, liabilities and assets. So we have gotten ourselves in our head. Okay, yes, but government has to pay interest on that debt. It creates the money that it pays the interest on that debt. That's it. That's it. It's that simple. It's another way of bypassing laws, because usually money is spent into existence when government creates laws. But what does it do? It creates interest rates. Why? Because it wants to protect a positive interest rate. Why? Because it sells bonds. Why? Because people want a safe investment. Government checks don't bounce. Okay? So the interest payments are new money as well. It's not your tax dollars. Sorry, not your tax dollars. The taxes do you have a totally different loop over here. Taxes purge reserves. So when you pay a tax, remember, government has its debt. We have our asset. That debt over here creates a reserve in the banking system, because money that you think you see isn't real money. What money is, high-powered money, is what's going on inside of the banking system, okay? So when you pay a tax, it comes back like the dark and light crystal. That reserve in the banking system is wiped out. It's no longer, it's deleted, it's gone. Nobody made that money. Nobody earned that money, right? What they did, banks do, is they earn that interest, and it's a policy decision. It is 100% a policy decision that they earn interest on. I don't think we pay interest on reserves anymore. I think it was like 2010 sometime we stopped doing it. But the point is that they have chosen to sell bonds. And what are bonds? You can only buy a bond in the United States with a US dollar. You can't buy bonds with foreign currency. You can only buy it with US dollars. And when you buy your bond, okay, that interest is they already know what the terms of your bond are. They already know what it is. And it is just as fungible as money. You're taking yellow dollars because what you've done is you created a box with your existing dollars in it that creates interest. That's it. And that's why you see all the interest portfolio or the investment portfolios have a certain level of bond purchases to hedge against ebbs and flows in the stock market because it's volatile. But bonds are never that. Bonds, yes, and that is a great quote right there. If we understood how the monetary system worked for real, we would really lose our shit over how they lie to us about not having money to take care of student debt. Why do we even have student debt? That we would lose our minds that we don't have health care. But instead, a lot of shitheads run around telling everyone, hey, fucking debt, man. We can't spend that money. Government's out of control, man. Dude, cool dude. We're spending so much money. It's out of control. And those fuckwits are playing the master's hand to create austerity out of stupidity, out of moroticness, out of ignorance, out of propaganda, whatever it is. At the end of the day, what they're doing is the bidding for the bad guys. And you call them whatever you want. They call him Igor. I don't care. Yes, master. Yes, right? Now, what the ticket example? Okay, so you go and you buy a ticket to a concert, right? Ticket costs you, I don't know, $100. You go to the concert. What you're doing, you care about is the concert. The ticket's worthless. You go to a Broadway play and you give the jacket guy your coat. He gives you a ticket. You come back, you hand him your ticket, you get your coat. You go to the valet. You say, hey, park my car. You pay them $20. They give you a ticket. Hey, it's the same thing as money. It's just like a stamp. It's all the same thing. It's not a big fucking deal. What it is a credit relationship. Right now, they have a liability. You have an asset. It's it. It's not a big deal, but we make it a big deal. And it's a particularly dumb deal because the government, I like this Sbarro's analogy, right? So I used to be a general manager of Sbarro's, the Italian eatery, and a pizza maker and all the others. Yeah, the pizza pie.
Shit food.
Yeah. and the Lasantes, you know. Anyway, we would sit there and we would hand out 50-cent coupons to everybody. I would stand on the corner handing out 50-cent coupons with a big, huge poster board turned into a big funnel on my head to look like a stupid hat that would draw attention to me. But I would give them 50-cent coupons. And guess what? Every one of those people in the line out there coming into the mall would come into my store with their 50-cent coupon I had just handed them and get 50% off or 50 cents off on a pizza. And I didn't give a rat's ass. You know what I did with those coupons? I fucking threw them in the trash. We didn't fund ourselves with 50-cent coupons. The government doesn't fund itself with dollars. It doesn't need dollars. It needs you to need dollars. So it imposes a tax payable only in dollars. So you need to do it. So you got to do something for it, right? And so this whole idea of 36 trillion in debt fucking hurts like a mofo, right? It's like, oh my God, I got to pay my interest payments on my credit cards, and I got to pay my mortgage, and I got to pay my car payment, got to pay insurance, and oh my God, food's gone up. Debt's scary as fuck for regular people, but we're currency users. The currency issuer laughs and says, there's nothing that we can't afford that's payable in US dollars. And guess what? Before some snapperhead says, well, what if they lose faith in the dollar, man? Right? The fact is they use a tax. That tax keeps you needing the dollar. And you know what happens if you don't pay your taxes? Let me introduce you to the IRS. Let me introduce you to the court system. Let me introduce you to homelessness and vehiclelessness and literally garnishment of your wages. If you think taxes are a funding operation, you've lost the plot. taxes are a coercive relationship with your government. It's not that the government's doing something nefarious. It is, by the way, doing something nefarious, but a fiat currency in general requires us to need its currency. So imposing any level of taxation is a means of maintaining the priming of the pump and the loop that creates an economy. Now, if we were socialists and we were in control of things, you would have all your needs met. Why? Because me as the government, I would pay doctors directly and say, make sure you give them care. And here's the standard to receive payment. Here's the standard. It's total help. They don't have to pay a nickel at the point of service. You need a house, no problem. We will make sure everyone has a house. And why do people rob and steal? Because they're desperate as fuck, not because they're black or brown or poor. They're poor because of the fucking system. Because you thought the government was drowning in 36 trillion in debt and you wanted to cut spending. Okay. Oh, and then the worst part, and this is the sickest part. Libertarian ideology says that whenever the government spends, it's inflationary because it's increasing the money supply. They don't realize that we're not on a commodity money. They don't realize that we are on a free-floating fiat currency. And they don't realize that interest payable to banks is a policy choice. We could end the Fed tomorrow to make every freaking chucklehead that doesn't know what the Fed does happy. And then you would say that the Rothschilds took over the Treasury. Okay? It doesn't fucking matter. It's just a credit relationship. And so this idea of 36 trillion in debt is a means of control, because you notice that that term 36 trillion in debt never once comes up when we just freaking funnel all the goods and services to Israel, when we funnel all the goods and services to Ukraine, when we funnel all these things. We don't sit there and go, how are we doing it? Because you know what the government is doing? It's not sending money to Israel. What it's doing is it's sending money to weapons manufacturers to create jobs in the US, who then in turn, based on the contract, send that goods and services to Israel. Hey, you need 50 planes? No problem. We'll make you 50 planes. It's going to be $10 billion or whatever. Okay, there you go. At the end of the day, this is the problem. We really believe that the currency issuing government is borrowing money from China. We're borrowing money from China. And China, we're going to go to war with you, but we're borrowing money from you to fund our war against you. It makes so much fucking sense that every fucking knucklehead believes it. And after a while, you start scratching your head going,
maybe this isn't how it really is supposed to be.
Maybe not. Maybe not so much, right? After a bit, but it takes a bit. Let's watch this film, man.
Being a recipe for chaos, and one thing buried underground may be the root of all of this, and that is oil. To put everything into perspective, the US is sitting on an estimated 264 billion barrels of untapped thin oil. There's over 60 billion barrels under Texas alone, which is weird considering the fact that the US has been hit hard by oil and fuel shortages time and time again. It's given OPEC tons of power to exploit the US, and what's more is that this US thin oil is actually better oil overall than most other oil that's being imported.
You know, I just had a thought about, speaking of Spaceballs, you know, that conversation was like 10,000 years of fresh air. The way he runs things, it won't last 100. So I'm thinking, okay, so we got all the soil underneath our soil. Do you, knowing our country, do you know how fast we would burn through it? No pun intended. All of that fucking shit. It's
just remember, this is the most important thing about this. First of all, it gets into this funny logic, and I can't wait to bust it out in a minute. But you know, the US, these are assets. These are real resources, right? And people that are stupid and follow the Trump method, who are listening to this whole thing about tariffs and we're going to bring the jobs home. And don't get me wrong, it'd be great if we had jobs here, but he ain't bringing them home that way. That ain't how it works, okay? If you think about the fact that we are literally taking their oil for our dollars and keep maintaining our oil while we do that. If you don't see the genius, evil genius, but genius in that, I'm sorry to tell you that there's genius in that. But because people don't understand the relationship between imports and exports, because people take their political economy before they think about the base case of government printing money. I hate that term, but I'll use it just for this purpose. Printing money to buy oil, okay? here's my piece of paper that I create freely. Oh, by the way, give me that oil that you slaved over to get out of the ground. You know what I mean? That is the ultimate coup around the world. That is empire at a, but has nothing to do with the quote unquote petrodollar, which he's going to get into in a minute. And I want to preempt it a little bit, right? The petrodollar is nothing more than what we call a numeraire. It's not a real thing. Anybody can trade their currency in for whatever. Now, mind you, in the rest of the world, because they are not the preeminent reserve currency, there's a lot of reserve currencies. Let's not pretend not, because the UK, the pound is a reserve currency. Japan's yen is a reserve currency. The Australian dollar is a reserve currency. The euro is a reserve currency. And quite frankly, China purposely doesn't do some of the things that would make it very, very viable. This is part of the reason why the BRICS will have more of a challenge to unseat the dollar. And it won't change really a whole lot of anything. The difference will be, instead of having the privilege of being able to deal directly using dollars to handle international transactions, we'll have to be like a good, normal community member and have to trade our dollars, change our dollars from dollars to whatever we're trading in that moment. And it really is such an irrelevant nothing burger in the end. It does, though, provide us with the makings of empire. And you can see this through the use of the IMF giving loans in US dollars. Think about this. If you are Venezuela or Argentina or you come up with Argentina, Chile, some African nation that is down in its luck and needing foreign goods and services, US government through the IMF is here to provide you a loan from the IMF, payable with all these terms like structural adjustments, where you got to eliminate any barriers to entry and allow my corporations to come in and literally harvest the things, your real wealth, the things in the ground, steal that from you so you can pay your foreign dollar denominated debt. And that right there is the real name of empire, if you really begin to understand the way empire works. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in because they're going to go into this and it's going to make me, like, my eyes are going to roll back into my head.
Hold on,
so go ahead.
It's cheaper, it's cleaner, it's easier to refine, and it's actually better for the environment. Even with all of this, you would think that just one major shortage or one big scare would be enough to start the process of switching things over, especially when this could end up being more profitable for the US in the long run anyway. This affects every single person living in America, but because it's not being used, it's making everyone poorer in ways that most can't even comprehend. And the truth of this has been covered up for decades. The cause of our problems today comes from how the US reacted to the crisis, and it all links back to how Washington and the financial apparatus took advantage of the crisis, not the crisis itself. Now, Richard Nixon, for all of his faults, did actually have a plan to prevent all of this from happening again. He knew that the pressure building up in the Middle East was going to explode, and he also knew that this wasn't a problem that would go away anytime soon. One more problem with access to the oil supply, and the US would be plunged yet again into another crisis. So his solution was pretty simple: invest in nuclear energy. Ever since the Manhattan Project, the US has led the world in nuclear technology. It was the only truly viable alternative to fossil fuels and oil. He knew the petroleum industry wasn't going to reset their infrastructure for American light oil either. However much money they made, they'd never pay the bill to restructure everything, and their power within the government was far too great to force them into it. So he tried to bypass them. In a speech following the crisis, he announced Project Independence, a plan to build nuclear power plants across the country. This nearly limitless source of clean energy would have given the US everything it needed to finally wean itself off of liquid gold. But as we know now, it never came to fruition. Nixon's plan was ambitious, but it lasted about as long as he did. A year later, the brewing Watergate crisis pushed him out of office. The US government was then left in shambles with seemingly nobody at the helm. That was except for one man who would decide the fate of the world's future: Henry Kissinger. He had a different plan to secure America's future, and it wasn't based on nuclear energy. Instead, he was going to work with Wall Street to secure America's dominance over the world, and he was going to use oil to do it.
As if that man couldn't die 1,000 deaths any harder than he already has. To think that a man as evil as that when it comes to Laos and Cambodia, but then you think about how he really changed the financial infrastructure of the United States. This is one evil son of a bitch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to simp for nuclear energy. I have a lot of very, very valid physics-based pushback on that, but that's not really the
I
point.
support nuclear. I'm
My problem comes down to talking with physicists and understanding the waste that comes from this. And there's certain things that just can't be undone, right? That's part of the problem. You have an earthquake, you have a Chernobyl moment. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that goes into this, but even on a more day-to-day kind of thing, there's other issues there. And again, I'm not going to go down the nuclear path right now. I want to stick with the economic one and kind of focus on the oil problem, right? What they're trying to say is the US has this sweet crude and that the rest of the world has this sour, kind of chunky, gross crude, right? Like sour crude. And so our facilities, our refineries are built to manage that. And that is true to a large degree. That is true. What is not true is that it would cost us billions. Yes, it would cost the federal government if it decided that energy policy was part of its charter to make an energy policy and pass a law that said we are going to retrofit these refineries to handle sweet crude, or we're going to go ahead and shift completely to renewables in some way, shape, or form. It could literally fund every retrofitting of a smokestack in America. It could literally afford to make sure that every human being had access to high-speed rail or planned communities. It could do any of these things. It's not going to do that. Why? Because they want to extract private wealth from the system. And the only way to do that is to take what's available in the private sector until that's all saturated, and then eliminate other public spaces. This is why they want to eliminate, public housing and public support for, you name it, the entire public aspects of schooling, of education, of roads, you name it. I mean, it's all being privatized in the name of private absolute capital accumulation and finance capitalism, and these major companies that should have been broken up by actually being anti-monopoly, anti-trust, okay? Trust busters, okay? They don't exist anymore. So you've got these mega corporations buying up properties, buying up all these things that are saying, no, no, no. When in reality, the government could right now literally make it so that none of this was an issue. And if, for example, it was a concern that we, the people, are paying too much for gas, if they're not worried about the environment, they're just going to make sure we got plenty of for gas and stuff. There's literally nothing preventing the federal government from subsidizing we, the people, on fuel versus the oil companies for fuel. Okay, there's nothing preventing it to go the other way. And I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating for green energy. I'm advocating for using only the amount of oil needed for lubricants and other things. I'm advocating for a total revisioning of what a sustainable world looks like. And understanding that the coal rolling F-150s with the gun rack in the back are going to hate it every step of the way. But unfortunately, somebody's got to sit down with them and explain to them, hey, dude, I get it, man. You want to go hunt deer? You want to go fishing? You want to roll your F-150 on its jacked up coal rolling, exhaust? I get it, man. It makes you feel like you're a man, makes up for some small areas between your legs. I get it. But with that in mind, the reality is this is what we need to do, unless we just are cool with perishing. And that goes back to our conversation about these Christian Zionists who are looking for end times and aren't worried about blowing up the world because they see that they're accelerationists of a different flavor.
Indeed. We'll continue.
Just a couple of years before the crisis, US policymakers had been focused on an entirely different problem, one that would change America forever. In this period, the US economy had been growing at insane rates, and all of this time the currency had been pegged to gold, but now the supply of gold was being outpaced by the rest of the economy, which was inflating more and more every single day. The gold standard at least gave the dollar some legitimacy, but eventually the gold standard was to become almost obsolete.
Time out. So let me explain this to you. Back when a country is just getting started, or when an empire conquers a territory, using gold as a means of saying, hey, the paper's good, I promise, you can convert it to this thing, is kind of like a gamble to get adoption. Hyman Minsky has always said, I mean, he's dead now, but written many, many times, anybody can create a currency. The issue is getting it accepted, right? And so when you're trying to get something accepted, having it pegged to gold when you're a rookie, when you're a little teeny nobody, when you're trying desperately to create you could start with this. But once you have the apparatus in place to enforce attacks, like I said previously, a gold standard literally holds you to digging up gold or going and conquering another country to get more gold for your war chest, if this is the way you want to do it. There's literally no point in the world whatsoever. We've never really been on a true gold standard anyway. It's always been extraordinarily arbitrary, always. Okay. And so the idea of this is what gives it legitimacy is moron talk, because ultimately, what do you do when you have a gold standard? You make sure that the people that really have money, and the people that don't are really poor. You don't have to go far back to the Great Depression in the 1920s and 1930s. I mean, you don't have to look far. You can see these things. This right here is a libertarian fetish. And actually, sadly, I've seen socialists who don't understand Marx and have never been scientific in their socialism, so they never bothered learning what fiat was because, well, why be scientific? Marx said to be scientific. Wait, hold on, scientific and utopian? So why is it that we aren't scientific in understanding systems? When things change, when the material conditions change, if you've learned dialectical materialism, if you learned historical materialism and understand these things, you would immediately understand that things have fucking changed. And you would understand how the system works, and more importantly, how it could work in the hands of a dictatorship of the proletariat, if that was your desire. Right. Instead, we don't understand these things. And so we superimpose ignorance like a gold standard, which is just the stupidest thing ever, beyond dumb. What they're doing is they're banking on the collapse of your country because they want to have gold for when they go to the other country so they can get the other currency. Because let's be fair, Elon Musk isn't taking gold bullion. He's taking US dollars. Bill Gates, when he gets his subsidies, isn't taking gold. He's loving every US dollar he gets. The same thing with Virgin and all the rest of these rich people. The Adelsons, they love US dollars. This is not, they are not the ones belly aching about this. It's people that don't know any better, that just say things, that they have things to say and their mouths do this, but their brains are shut off. Gold standard is no standard to live by. And literally, if you understand that money came out of credit relations, not barter, okay, if you understand that money started with credit relations, then you understand that all money is a form of credit. I have mine, now I'm giving it to you. You in then turn and use it to settle another debt. There's nothing more than that. And as long as it is able to pay taxes, it will retain whatever value it has. You pay $1 in tax, you get $1. That's it. That's the relationship. And so when you understand that and you say, well, where's all this inflation coming from? Do some homework. I challenge you to do some homework. What do I want us to do? Well, what I want us to do is organize outside of the electoral process. And I want us to build dual power. I want us to build mutual aid. I want us to build legal aid. I want us to ensure people that don't have homes have homes. Because what happens when you are just a union person and the union decides to call a strike? What happens? The strike fund may pay you $200 a week, but you're over there flipping dough at Domino's Pizza trying to make ends meet. And all of a sudden, if you didn't stash a war chest of $20,000, God help you, to survive the strike, you're going to have to do something. And that's when you start seeing people cross the strike. You've got to earn a general strike. You've got to earn these things. And to earn them, it requires organization. And people hate organizing. They want to be a big fish in a small pond. They want to be the master of their own destiny. They don't want to work together. But that's what I want. What I want is that. But what I'm trying to do by explaining economics is to show you that you are wasting your fucking time with elections. You're wasting your fucking time trying to hope that you can gamble it correctly. We must organize together. And quite frankly, that means taking on an unjust government. And that means something very scary. But in reality, that's what I want. It's not what I want. Actually, it's not what I want. It is what is to be done, to quote my guy Lenin. Okay. It really is what is to be done, is the answer to the question, what is to be done? And if you could work with capitalists to get everything you wanted, if you could work within this system, it wouldn't work because this system needs poor people. It needs people at the bottom to do the bottom jobs. And no amount of automation is going to take care of all of that.
Yep.
Okay.
And that is where the whole immigration issue is going to come to a head, where people are going to realize that, hey, you may have an issue with illegal immigrants, but the bigger issue isn't the illegal immigrant. It's the person hiring the illegal immigrant. You know, when I see the people out there saying, oh, we can't run our operation with illegal immigrants, it's because you don't want to pay a living wage. That's the only reason.
What if we had a federal job guarantee? Now, mind you, we're not going to get that with this government. Let me be crystal clear. No. This would violate this. The business community needs us laid off, to be poor, to be desperate, to take whatever they give us, to not be strong and powerful and organized, to demand higher wages and better conditions, right? So what they will do is they would literally fight against the job guarantee. But if you had a federal job guarantee, and if you were to eliminate some of these industries that are causing the planet to burn up and create what we call a just transition and pay those people salaries and also train them into new industry that would handle renewable energy or providing healthcare versus the healthcare denial service, right? You literally could do this stuff. You could literally fund every one of these paychecks. We could have nationalized payroll during COVID and you wouldn't have heard a peep from anybody. Oh, they shut us down. We're losing money. No, we could have literally, and we did shows on that. We had Pavlina Chernova come in and talk about, if you really want this to work for everyone, nationalize fucking payroll. Make these folks whole so it doesn't matter, so we can do the right thing without hurting each other. No, I'm not going to debate the COVID thing.
But unfortunately, the entire system would collapse on itself, because then people would see it for what it really is. The entire the entire veil will be removed. Again, I believe in the free market, but I believe in a real free market. What we have, this is not a free market, which is why I've always said capitalism cannot survive without socialism. Period. Any other way is just kidding yourself, because in the end, the only people who defend it, as I said, are the ones who are not just benefiting from the system, but immensely benefiting from it. And the same is true with the state of Israel. It's the same thing. Let's finish this up.
And so the US needed a new system, one that could benefit a handful of people. So Kissinger devised a plan to secure America's economic dominance without the gold standard, whilst also enriching his friends in the finance industry and putting them in a dominant position over US politics. So remember the war we mentioned earlier, the one that caused this whole oil crisis to begin with? Well, Kissinger was instrumental in causing this exact war. If the balance in the everlasting Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia ever shifts too drastically, then that could upset their oil monopoly and the whole petrodollar system. It's led America to be an interventionist state, spending its population's money on unwinnable wars and propping up corrupt and ineffective regimes, only to fall apart the second America takes its troops out. It's all the more tragic when you begin to think about what could have happened instead. If Nixon's nuclear plan had been put into practice, the US would have built hundreds of power plants. They would have satisfied its energy need decades ago, and it would still be enough energy production even today. With all of that nuclear energy, the US wouldn't have been able to maintain the oil-based monopoly it refuses to give up.
Mixed bag, mixed bag, but I think Moon makes some pretty salient points, especially about nuclear energy. But unfortunately, and we run into this problem often, as you like to point out, when it comes to the issue of the monetary system and how it really works, you have people that speak when they shouldn't speak.
Yes.
And it ends up hurting the cause. That is what I would say to Moon, because I think Moon does do some pretty solid content. But if the argument you're making is an argument that is not accurate, you end up hurting the good points about what you're fighting for, and people are just going to ignore that. And they're just going to see it as, well, we can't do that or this, whatever, because you're saying that we should still be on the gold standard or the petrodollar. And all the while, we're being hoodwinked by a government that doesn't think its people will ever rebel against them. That's it.
Just think about this. I mean, if you want, if you can, if you're interested in hearing my side of this world here, folks, Japan right now, a tiny island nation, okay, has literally a diminishing population, and they have a 300% debt to GDP ratio, which is irrelevant in the real world. But because people care about that shit, which is stupid, it doesn't mean anything. What it means is that they keep spending money into the economy to keep it going because they don't have enough of the other stuff to bring it back in. They don't have enough commerce to do this stuff. And so they don't have enough people. And to have the quality of life that they want, the government buys its own debt, right? It buys its own bonds that it puts out there. Why not? Who cares? It's irrelevant. Stop selling bonds if you don't want bonds. If you don't want a safe investment, stop selling them. But in reality, the more we think that the government, I beg you all, if you get nothing else out of this, please try not to fall down the Rothschild hole for about an eighth of a second. Just humor me, please. And just don't do it. All right. Please just don't do it. I used to have this thing back when I was younger where I would scream like Tom Araya of Slayer and say, Rothschilds. I can't do it anymore. I would hit the high note. And it was fun because I just had so much. They are. There's no question about it. The bad guys, there's always a Blofeld kind of, Sherlock Holmes moment waiting to happen with all, James Bond, Mission Impossible. We love to have our heart beat a little bit faster. We need that in our lives. But the reality is some of these things are just fucking boring. They're not exciting. And the truth is just the truth, right? The government gives banks charters. Banks operate at the behest of the government, okay? The government changes those charters all the time. But if you think that a capitalist government in league with these banks is going to do something that tightens the screws on the banks, you just don't have any class awareness. You don't have any class understanding, okay? And you need to bone up on that just a little bit, right? But the government is large and in charge. It's choosing to allow these things to happen.
Yes.
Okay. And it's a love relationship. If you look at The Big Short, right? The great movie that described the global financial crisis that happened in 08 and 09 and all that good stuff. You understand there is a revolving door from JP Morgan, the House of Morgan, into the government, back out again. It's been that way since the turn of the century. It's been that way since the dawn of time. Okay. Since the dawn of the colonial project. Not since the dawn of this world, but this colonial project that we live in, that we call home. Okay. So if you understand that, you stop asking, why don't they have money for schools, but they have money for war? What if we cut the military?
Have money for schools. They choose not to give money to schools.
Here, let me really throw a real brain fuck on this one for a minute, right? Every good leftist, and I consider all you guys say stuff good leftists, you just don't understand money. And that's okay. Most leftists don't understand money, unfortunately. That's part of my role and my advocacy is to help the left understand money. It's to help everybody, but really I'm targeting my people over on the left. And so when you think about this, if you literally fundamentally don't understand the way money works, you will think, let's go ahead and cut the military budget by 50%. not realizing that you have to have a spending bill in place to backfill that spend, or you will go into a major recession, depression that will destroy the lives of the poor around your country. We don't cut money to save money. The government doesn't save money, it spends it into existence. So if you're trying to save the government money by cutting something, you're going about it all wrong. You've lost the plot. That's not how it works. We talk about the military and how absolutely evil it is. And what it does, and it's majestic in its own evil, is it creates all the piece parts for tanks and planes and all the other military elements in all the different states around the country. So if you go to cut the F-35 or the this or the that, every part of the country has got contracts based on creating piece parts for the military machine. And they're going to fight tooth and nail not to lose that subsidy. They don't want that base to close down because that is commerce in their region. And they know government's checks don't bounce. And by having military in there, they're spending their money in your community. And that's how you get tax revenue, because states, unlike the federal government, are currency users just like you and I. And let me tell you, I got into some huge fights with my friends that wanted to do state-by-state healthcare, trying to explain to them, listen, I love you, but if you don't understand that the currency issue is the federal government, you're creating the race to the bottom. These states are fighting with each other, and they will slash their tax base to bring business in there. And by doing this, the race to the bottom is complete. And if you're going to tell people you're going to raise taxes so you could pay for healthcare or pay for whatever, there's only a couple states that could really do that. California being one, probably New York being another, probably even Washington State, where the House of state by state lives, and maybe a couple other states. But for the most part, most states can't do this. Okay. And so what is the thing that everybody's looking for? They're looking for an underfunded program that can't survive hiccups and burps to say, see, I told you socialism is bad. The only thing wrong with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And at the state level, guess what? They ain't lying, because it is 100% tax driven. Yes. Okay. Only at the federal government does that money start. And you know what's even wilder? If you think about Medicare for all, and I am not a huge Medicare for all proponent, I am for a national health service.
I'm for single payer.
If you think about that, you are eliminating the denial business, which is a bunch of jobs.
Oh, yeah.
You're eliminating the advertising business, which is huge money.
That's really great jobs, credible jobs.
All that shit you're eliminating. So you know what Medicare for all actually is? You're going to love it. You want to kill inflation? Let's go ahead and do Medicare for all, because Medicare for all is deflationary. It's a job killer. It kills jobs. It slows economic activity. It kills GDP. And so if you do that, you better be prepared for a tax cut. But how many lefties are out there saying, I'm willing to pay more for my friend to have health care? And it's a bleeding heart. I feel good. That's great. It's not economically illiterate, but I get it. It's a nice sentiment.
I mean, I've been saying for the longest time, a single-payer healthcare system is a major tax cut, especially to the working and middle class. Like if there was your tax cut, that's where it is. The tax cuts that we are given are tax cuts that you will never enjoy, that you will never understand. I know people that save millions of dollars on taxes in ways that you will never be able to do, because the system is not designed to help you. It's designed to help the few people that are going to protect it till they die. And then the next generation will do it until we break the,
and you know what? You know what they'll fucking do? You go back, way back, okay? And there was, God, I can't believe I'm going to screw this up, man. This has always been my go-to. Something or other's rebellion. Please put it in the comments. You know what I'm talking about. Not Shay's rebellion, but there's a rebellion from way back when. And what happened was that the ownership class saw, the serfs and the slaves and the black slaves and the Latino slaves and the other slaves all come together, and they were willing to fight back. And so you know what the powers that be did? They said, I got it. We're going to go ahead and give like a nickel more to the white dudes, and we broke solidarity immediately because these fuckers were willing to take a nickel more to turn their back on their brothers and sisters.
Sure.
See, they know that's all it takes to make the rest of us splinter in our solidarity.
You make yourself desperate enough, then that's what ends up happening. But I will
That's
say,
exactly right.
for Katie Cat, here's what you have to understand. Now, I don't know where you're under this perception that healthcare would be shittier under a single payer system than it is now. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to know. It's very simple. What a single payer healthcare system ostensibly is you are removing the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. So by that measure, there is going to be an abundance more of money in the system. Now, if you have a single payer system that adheres to the free market principles, it basically means that you now as a doctor are relieved of all of the stress and all of the bureaucracy that exists within the health system. Don't call it a healthcare system because it ain't about healthcare. It's about for-profit health. But if you flip that and turn it into a healthcare system, now the doctors that are adhering to the principles of I'm going to show that I am the best doctor out there, that is the person who's going to get the most money. Hence, healthcare will get better. In this system, there isn't an incentive necessarily to be the best doctor. The incentive is to have the most amount of patients so that you can collect the most amount of money. That is not what single payer is. It is so transparently obvious how broken this system is and how a single payer system will solve that problem. With that said,
real quick, just to fix my flub. Thank you, VA from NY at 8:48 p.m. It's Bacon's Rebellion. And I learned this from Sandy Darity, and I learned this from Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. You go back through and you realize how they have always been able to weaponize Group A against Group B by the slightest bit of privilege.
of course,
All you got to do is be 1/8 of an inch above the pig shit, and you feel like you're king for a day.
I'm telling you, it's just like I said, I don't play in that stupid sandbox anymore. And I would always encourage people to eat right, exercise, get enough sleep, and just deal with that type of stress, because that is the only thing we really can do in the current system that we live in. But this knowledge is power, and it must continue to spread. If there is one issue above all other issues in this country that if you really get to brass tacks on, people universally agree, no pun intended, with a single payer healthcare system. We just got to do what we got to do to continue to spread the word. And we are going to get, if there is one policy that we must achieve in our lifetime, we have to get to healthcare. That's the one. And that is the only solution.
You have to help me figure out how to do that, though, brother. That's the thing. I don't believe we have a democracy.
I had 2,000 live stream viewers the other night. I don't know why.
You're the man.
Point, but we're getting there and we're working on it. But this is a clear-cut policy that anyone with a brain, with all due respect, should be able to recognize is the solution. It's the only solution, and we have to continue to spread that word. Guys, as you know, we are a small but mighty but growing channel. We're over 29,000 subscribers now, amazingly. We might get to 30,000 before Jen returns next Monday. If you are so inclined, please make sure you get to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter of our small but mighty channel. We did run our super fans, as I would call them before, who are supporting our channel. But we also have to give a big shout out to our super chats. Tommy John, who we know is hand in glove with Steve. Grumbine Fun Time is sublime as sunshine. Thanks, Pete and Jen, for giving our guy a platform to try and educate the ubiquitous mass of propagandized and misinformed. Let's not call them doofuses. You were almost there.
Almost there.
Fellow Americans would have done just fine.
He left a heart. He left a heart.
Tom John, we appreciate you, brother. Brett Boyle, our trusty, awesome MVP behind the scenes, along with Colin Tooley, who is our mod. Thank you for the 2 Canadian AF Zionazis. And don't forget those like buttons. Guys, we were cratering. I think we got to 199. We didn't get to 200. I think we were just below it. But we appreciate all of you here. JG1982, you are an amazing supporter of our channel. Thank you so much for gifting 5 Generational Change memberships. Guys, any amount helps. We certainly appreciate it. JG, thank you so much for the $5. Hippies, yippies, yuppies with puppies, gentrified many places, but yimbies are worst.
Amen.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy in politics. Unfortunately, we see it every day. And another $5 from JG1982. There's Bitcoin and shitcoins. If you do homework, you will find Bitcoin ethical money, not root of all evil if designed ethically. Well, like anything, in principle, it sounds great. In action, it's a whole other ball game, especially when the billionaire class decides to manipulate currency as well as digital currency. Land of the free, home of my rants. I believe you're new. Thank you so much for the $10. We appreciate you being here. If our taxes are being used to fund weapons sent overseas without our say, we have every right to question it. Peaceful protest and accountability from leaders should never be out of reach. Now, what I will teach you, Steve doesn't have to comment here. I'll take this one. What you have to remember, brother, and this is very important, it is not our taxes that is being used to fund weapons. What is happening is that the government is spending money for these weapons, and then when the tax bill comes due that we have to pay, we don't actually have a say in what that money is going towards. Hence, why we have a government that is completely and wholly corrupt. We have the ability to not have endless war, to have single payer, to have universal education, trade schools, clean drinking water, clean air. We have the ability to have all these things. We don't have these things because the people who run the levers of power want us to be a sick and depressed nation, so that way the oligarchs can live like kings for all time. Are we getting to the point where I think that the population is starting to clue in on that reality? I think we're getting there, maybe not as fast as we would like, but let me tell you, we get involved with Iran, that'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, as detrimental as it will be in the short run. The goal is always to see two sides of the coin. The goal here is to continue to wake up the populace, and they're waking up. So keep spreading the word, and thank you so much for your contribution. Alex Mauricio Zapata, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. We really appreciate you being here, my friend. JG with the $2. We can subsidize industries that help, not kill. Well, that would be great, but we don't run the levers of power, so we don't get that luxury at this time. JG again with the $2. Why subsidize war? Because war is profitable. That's all. Nothing more. Nat Turner Rebellion, JG with the $2. It was
Bacon's
the
Rebellion, but still good.
Good thought anyway. Mark J with the $2. Thank you for educating me about money. We're all being educated, Mark. We're all here to learn. And that's the thing. The hardest reality about the people who espouse, we're in debt, and we're in this, and we can't afford this or that. Those are the most detrimental people because they are under the illusion that they know everything and that they're well educated enough that you can't learn something new. I think I'm very well educated. So is Steve. And you know what? I try to learn something new every single day. And if something that I know isn't correct, I try to learn more from that. You don't have to agree on everything, but the principles it has to be a baseline. There isn't this, well, monetary MMT is just a theory. No, it is what it is. I don't have to agree with all these so-called principles about how we can utilize it, but what I can agree on is that the government prints money and then we're taxed to curb inflation. At least that's the theory. But at the end of the day, we kind of have a lot of things backwards in the United States. Not much of a surprise. Piano Man, one of our amazing supporters of our channel, thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. And as I mentioned, you guys that are here this evening, these conversations are only possible with our great support from you guys. Our channel, as I said, is growing rapidly as we speak. We are actually closing in very closely on 29,100 subscribers. So, like I said, every day that we do this channel, we are extremely grateful that we have our wonderful audience. Even though it does appear that Mondays are the weak link in the chain as of right now, we're obviously going to consider other nights. Of course, Thursdays are pretty big. Saturday was huge, and we'll see what happens going forward. Steve, you've obviously been here for almost 2 hours. I'm going to give you the option to decide if you want to stick with me for one more big topic, or if you have to bounce, you tell me what you'd like to do.
I have to bounce, brother, but I just want to thank you and thank everybody for listening. This is not easy shit that I talked about tonight. And I tried my best to hit the subjects in a way that would hopefully keep your attention. But they are hard. They're challenging, and, I have a Master of Business Administration, a Master of Science and Technology Management, and I had to unlearn all that because I paid good money to learn it the wrong way. So, I came from being a libertarian. I came from being a Republican. I did a drive-by in the Democratic Party, and now I am a socialist, and I'm a non-electoral socialist. I'm a guy who's looking to build the vanguard, if you will, and to educate as many people as possible to radicalize. So thank you, Peter. And I see you walking away, but I know you hear me. Thank you for having me on. It was great tonight. And thank you all for sticking around and listening. I do a podcast called Macro and Cheese, and it covers geopolitical issues. It covers history. It covers all kinds of economic and science stuff tied together. It's all bundled. There's none of it that is unrelated. They're all tied together. So once you get on the Macro and Cheese train, we also have a Tuesday night webinar that we do. Probably conflicts with some other shows around here, but I got to tell you, Tuesday nights, we get together in a webinar fashion. We listen to the podcast together. We talk about them. Everybody gets a chance to actually get on the mic and talk. So if you're interested, by all means, check us out. And that's at, you can go to Patreon, Real Progressives. You can go to Substack, Real Progressives at Substack. And of course, you can go to our website, realprogressives.org. We are a 501c3 not for profit. So by all means, any donations and stuff are tax deductible. So please consider it. So with that, Peter, thank you so much for having me on. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. Thanks again.
Thanks for holding it down, brother. Great to see you as always.
You got it, man. Bye-bye.
Have a great night. So Steve's one of our favorites, as you know. He has been with us for quite some time. Yeah, he always brings the truth, and he's not everybody's cup of tea, which I understand, but that's okay. Because in the end, I just want honest conversation. That's what everybody should want. JG, thank you again for the $2. And yes, we all hope that Steve takes care of himself. It's a rough world out there. It really is. And I think in many ways, we ask ourselves, how do we get to this point? How are we staring down the barrel of World War III as we speak? It is a pretty precarious situation as of this moment. Right now, my understanding, as I'm sure you guys have probably seen as well, that the U.S. is moving warships into the Middle East. Extremely disturbing. If that is to, in any way, shape, or form, get ourselves involved in this war that is apparently starting, that Israel started. It's amazing. It's amazing the world of lies that the Zionists live in. They're really trying to convince people that they didn't start this. Oh, they most certainly did. And it looks like Iran is not backing away. In fact, they are intending to level Tel Aviv. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel terrible for the people that are there that obviously want no part of this without question. But this was an inevitability with the actions of this Zionist psychopathic state. And so we're going to cover a big story now for those of you that are familiar with the Bibi files. Now, I was made aware of this by some great people in the chat recently, and I wasn't able to find the actual video. What I was able to find was a explanation of the movie, documentary, if you will, from Ian Carroll, who now works for Candace Owens. And so I'm going to play you guys bits of these clips of what is a coverage of the actual story behind the Bibi files and why it's so significant, especially to what we're dealing with right now.
Netanyahu, over the years, had many corruption cases. In 1997, he was investigated for appointing the Attorney General in some corrupt deal. Later, he was interrogated for getting gifts. Also, one case that starts from investigative report that I made, it's about the submarines deal that Israel has with Germany, but he was never prosecuted. When you do something wrong and you get away with it once and twice and 3 times and 10 times and 20 times, you're beginning to think that you are immune.
Right on the head. Netanyahu's reign of terror has been going on for basically more than a generation. It's been going on since the early 80s. And as this gentleman is alluding to in the documentary, Yeah. He never is told no. He never seems to ever get knocked off his perch. Even in the brief times that he is out of power, he always manages to find his way back in. And we're going to learn now exactly why that is the case.
Government struggles with corruption, and Israel is certainly no exception to that rule. Avraham Horshin, the Minister of Finance from 2006 to 2007, was convicted in 2009 of embezzling millions of shekels and other financial corruption. He was sentenced to 5 years and 5 months, plus a small fine. In 2010, Moshe Katsav, the 8th president of Israel, was convicted of rape, sexual harassment, committing an indecent act while using force, harassing a witness, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 7 years and wound up serving about 5. In 2014, former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert was sentenced to 6 years in prison. After appeals and continued trials, he wound up with a sentence for 27 months in prison, of which he wound up serving about 16, plus paying a small fine for corruption, much like what Netanyahu is accused of.
But of course, he's not being prosecuted for crimes that are substantially worse than the ones that even these guys were convicted of. So when you have a government that is solely corrupt and that doesn't prosecute actual crimes, you get to this point, but it gets even worse.
Netanyahu stands accused of 3 separate but related offenses, titled Case 1000, 2000, and 4000. And I don't know who the hell comes up with these names. I don't write the rules. I just work here. They have dumb names. But Case 1000 revolves around Benjamin Netanyahu receiving a 20-year supply of gifts from ex-Israeli spy turned Hollywood tycoon Arnon Milchan.
So therein lies this big issue that exists, as people have always said about Hollywood, and that is, remember, there is a substantial amount of propaganda that goes into a lot of the films that are made. And so this should come as no surprise when somebody like this guy, Milchan, evidently is one of the proxies for Netanyahu and the whole merging of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, which is as unholy as any as we've ever had. And we must dissolve it as soon as possible.
In exchange for illicit government favors like extending a tax loophole that would have saved him millions of dollars, pressuring John Kerry for help with Milchan's visas, and interceding on behalf of Milchan's investments using Netanyahu's government authority. All the types of things that Israel has jailed officials for in the past. And by the way, Arnon Milchan openly bragged about his time as an Israeli spy when he helped Israel steal nuclear technology from the US for their secret nuclear program that they.
So imagine that. Imagine that Israel stole nuclear secrets from the United States. It's not enough to bomb the USS Liberty. It's not enough that they have dragged us into every war over the past 40 plus years. Frankly, you probably would have to go back even longer than that, but at least 40 years. And it's not enough that this country probably had a direct hand in not only 9/11, as well as the assassination of JFK. My God, it's like there's nothing redeemable about Israel.
Aren't supposed to have, and still officially do not. That's actually tied into why Bibi had to help him deal with the visa issues, but that's a different rabbit hole. Case 2000 involves Netanyahu's relationship with the publisher and controlling owner of one of the most popular Israeli newspaper publications, Yedioth Aharonoth. His name is Arnon Moses. The allegation is that Netanyahu was trading political favors for positive media coverage of him and his wife.
We're seeing that circumstance happen right now with the New York Times putting out a front page and a full article to go after Zohran Mamdani and give very favorable coverage to Andrew Cuomo. Now, obviously, it's at nowhere near the size and scope as it would be with somebody like Netanyahu, but you get the idea of exactly the type of media manipulation that goes on. We saw this during the course of Bernie's presidential runs, especially in 2016, where the corporate media did everything in their power to discredit Bernie, prop up Trump, because that's what Hillary Clinton and her people wanted to see happen. Hence why we're here.
This is especially concerning because the relationship came into focus surrounding the 2016 election, where the two allegedly collaborated to weaken Netanyahu's opponent and presumably win him the election. Who knows if he would have won without this corrupted media slant in his direction, but that's concerning. Case 4000 is pretty similar to Case 2000. It involves Netanyahu forming a similar relationship with the owner of one of Israel's top online news platforms named Walla. He used it to run positive coverage of him and his wife, as well as negative coverage of his opponents. Basically, Netanyahu has allegedly fashioned himself more and more over the years as the supreme ruler of Israel, and he has wielded his power to corrupt the media, exchange favors, and enrich his family through his position of power.
And just remember, the person that he was running that smear campaign against was Naftali Bennett. So it's not like he was doing it against anybody better than him. In fact, he was probably just as bad. The entire state of Israel is an absolute nightmare. And it would be one thing if it was on its own, but it's not. We're attached to them in more ways than one. So that is, to me, the issue of our time, is disintegrating that relationship before it's too late. But we'll continue.
One, he was out with mainstream Israeli politics. He had become a pariah and lost his support as a central figure in Israeli politics. And so he looked around for allies, and he found them in the furthest extreme Israeli right wing, where Jewish supremacists, settler colonialists, genocidal terrorists had all been waiting for their day in power. And Bibi decided that given the choice between facing his charges and probably going to prison, or taking Israel down a genocidal, racist, and supremacist path, he chose the latter.
And boy, did he ever. But who's to say that this wasn't always his intention? Remember, we have footage of him that we played on Saturday that shows he has been at the forefront of advocating for every single war that the United States has been involved in for over a generation, and especially since 9/11, and especially since he was kind of intimating that 9/11 was happening. I mean, he's a sinister motherfucker on his own, but there's no telling how many moving parts go along with him. But now you're going to learn more about SMEARS and Gvir, people that, in my opinion, are just as bad, if not even worse, than Netanyahu.
He chose to go to any length to retake power and escape prison. Now meet Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, two of the most prominent and clear examples of the path that Netanyahu has taken his country down. Both live in illegal Israeli settlements on stolen land in the West Bank. Both have participated in and support Jewish terrorism in the past. They represent the most fervent, fascist, religious extremism of the Israeli right wing. They represent the beliefs of many Jewish supremacists in Israel that the Palestinian people should be eliminated and ethnically cleansed at any cost, that they are goyim and not deserving of the same rights as Jews. And now they have a stranglehold over Benjamin Netanyahu, even if he wanted out of the toxic relationship, which there's not necessarily indication that he does. But because they represent the right-wing coalition that elected him, if Netanyahu doesn't appease them, he will almost surely lose his position and maybe be locked up.
And that is the crux of it all. This is why when it comes to somebody like Trump, and we're seeing how are we ending up in this situation, this is where I continue to revert back to what Whitney Webb talks about, which is it is one nation under blackmail, but it is a network that spans the entire world, and a lot of it is related to Israel. This is what people do in terms of maintaining the power structure, which is why it's very rare that anyone ever ascertains any level of power that could actually affect the system that isn't bought by it in the first place. And that's why when you get desperate enough, that's why I am really pulling for Mamdani to beat Cuomo in New York. I cannot emphasize enough the type of backroom deals, the type of in-bed relationships, politically speaking, that Cuomo is involved in right now that he will answer to should he get back into power. It is imperative that he loses, and it is imperative that we sever our relationship with Israel before they drag us straight to hell. And it looks like right now we're along for the ride. I hope it's not the case, but we collectively as the United States of America have to step up and put an end to this before it is too late.
Smotrich not only lives in an illegal Israeli settlement in the West Bank, but he actually lives outside of its borders as an active expansion of that settlement, which is a great metaphor for his political and religious perspective. He was literally arrested in 2005 for being a Jewish terrorist, though the investigation never pursued charges. The Jerusalem Post reports that as finance minister, he is working to cut off the Palestinian Authority from Israel's financial system. He is using his authority to stop transferring tax payments that belong to the Palestinian Authority and continues to prevent the return of Palestinian workers to Israel, together with his partners in the government and against recommendations of all security officials. As a result of these actions, the security forces are now alerting about the collapse of the Palestinian Authority and the dire consequences for Israel's security if such a scenario takes place. The economic strangulation of the Palestinian Authority carried out by the Israeli government occurs while money from Iran continues to flow to the West Bank with the aim of promoting terrorist attacks. Smotrich is not stupid, the Jerusalem Post reports. He understands the security dangers in the collapse of the Palestinian Authority's economy, but this is exactly his goal. His ideological partner, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, also supports the vision of chaos driven by Iran and the efforts to weaken the Palestinian Authority. During Jerusalem Day celebrations, Ben-Gvir stated that his policy is that Jews would be allowed to carry out religious rituals on the Holy Temple Mount. This is the faction that dreams of the day when they can destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuild the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount.
If that were to happen, that would probably spark the end of the world. That would be biblical-sized catastrophe if that were to happen. Keep that in mind.
Which is the symbolic center of the global religious conflict between Judaism and Islam. That course of action would almost certainly spell global war, quite likely nuclear in nature. And both of these men are intentionally stoking dissent, stoking division, and stoking chaos in the West Bank because they know that more terrorism, more chaos, more destabilization, though it leads to more violence, it also leads to opportunity. Itamar Ben-Gvir spoke openly in support of the assassination of the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, who signed the Oslo Accord peace treaties with the Palestinians.
I really hate this motherfucker. Like, I really do. I want to punch him in his triple chin as hard as I could possibly do it, if I could get within distance. Maybe one day I will. You never know. The idea that that bastard, along with Smotrich, shows their disgusting faces here in Washington. We don't have enough protesting in the nation's capital, I must say.
Here's a clip from the documentary to fill it in.
When it comes to Ben-Gvir, he supported the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin when he was a youngster.
He was once filmed holding a hood emblem he claimed was from the car of former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, an architect of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process.
Saying you managed to snatch the emblem from Rabin's car? The emblem is a symbol, and it symbolizes that just like we got to the emblem, we can get to Rabin as well. I think one is justified in committing horrible acts against him.
A Jewish extremist assassinated Rabin 3 weeks later.
Ben-Gvir, he was not recruited to military service because he was condemned in court as one who support Jewish terror.
Isn't it always the guys that never serve in the military, much less never serve in combat, or should I say never serve in combat, much less never serve in the military, are always the ones that are the loudest and most provoking of endless war? It's always those guys. It's always the weakest that are the most dangerous when it comes to power. And look at how many people he has to surround himself with. He needs a fucking entourage. Basically, what he has is he has a human shield surrounding him. He's got at least 4 or 5 men that have to stand by him at all times so that somebody can't take a clear shot at him. Talk about a person who's got a fucking death wish.
He's the follower of a racist movement and wants to expel what he calls disloyal Arabs.
I love Israel and I don't against all the Arabs. Just start the jihad.
Why do you want to
Just a minute.
Palestinians
They won't kill me and kill you, the jihadists.
In occupied East Jerusalem, he pulled out his gun, calling for Palestinians who throw stones to be shot.
He sees violence as a legitimate action.
These are people that Netanyahu would not agree to take picture with just 2-3 years ago. But now Smotrich is the Minister of Finance and Ben Gvir is the Minister of National Security.
Incredible. We've got one more. One more.
The focus is no longer on Netanyahu, no longer on his assault on Israeli democracy. Now the existential threat is Hamas. Despite the fact that Netanyahu propped up and facilitated millions of dollars of funding for Hamas for years.
And there it is. And this should never, ever be out of the conversation. Which is why I have been saying, as I believe a lot of other people have been saying, that October 7th was a setup. It was intended. No matter what anyone will say, no matter how hard and endless Zionists will cry, this was a politically motivated move to prop up Hamas and to ensure that the attack on October 7th did happen for political and economic purposes. Why else would Netanyahu be funding the very people that the Zionists claim are the reason why the Palestinian people are being genocided? It's all a ruse. All of it. It's as fake as the Zionist ideology. Period.
Specifically to keep the Gaza Strip destabilized. His own IDF ordered their helicopters to fire indiscriminately on vehicles returning to the Gaza Strip, likely killing dozens or even hundreds of Israeli civilians and potential hostages that were in and around those cars. It came out later that Netanyahu's intelligence services had known of the attack in advance, too, and they had not acted on that intelligence. In fact, they had coincidentally moved 2 full companies of IDF commandos away from the Gaza border just 2 days before the attacks, which I'm sure was just a coincidence and had nothing to do with their extremely advanced intelligence services knowing about the attacks in advance. And then, when the investigation into what really happened on October 7th got too hot, the court that Bibi was in the process of strangling ordered a suspension of the investigation. Nothing to see here. Are you getting the picture yet?
I hope we're getting the picture. And shout out to Ian Carroll for doing a fantastic job. And I have to say, credit where credit is due for doing an amazing job. Candace Owens' channel obviously has really zoned in on this particular issue. And look, for whatever the ideological reasons are that this is the case, what I can tell you is that people who are smart enough to see just how devastatingly dangerous the state of Israel is and our continued attachment to them, we must sever that relationship. And that is our job. Because as it appears, they have completely captured our government and the elected officials that supposedly run it. So we're going to have to find another way. And that other way is going to have to come from outside electoral politics. But what we do know is that we are at a point right now where the level of desperation that is coming from Netanyahu is reaching a fever pitch, to the point at which he's going on national television pleading with us to go to war on behalf of Israel against Iran. Here he is with Brett Baer the other day.
The nuclear threat. I want to talk about President Trump. You just said Iran tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you have intel that the assassination attempts on President Trump were directly from Iran?
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him. Look, he's enemy number one. He's a decisive leader. He never took the path that others took to try to bargain with him in a way that is weak, giving them basically a pathway to enrich uranium, which means a pathway to the bomb, padding it with billions and billions of dollars. He took up this fake agreement and basically tore it up. He killed Qasem Soleimani. He said, made it very clear, including now, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, which means you cannot enrich. He's been very forceful. So for them, he's enemy number one.
Yeah.
Look, they also tried to kill me, but I'm his junior partner.
When did
they
you
understand that President Trump.
I'm his junior partner. You know, before it always would seem like Trump was the one that was pulling out the chair for Bibi to sit down. Now Trump is talking as if he's in the shoes on the other foot. At least that's what it sounds like to me. To me, this all sounds like desperation. And whether or not this man fled to Greece, again, it's alleged that that's what he did, that he's not actually in Israel right now, and I am sure he's not. That I'm pretty safe in saying I guarantee he's not in Israel right now. I think that they're shocked. I think that they are surprised. But we're going to get to another clip and show you the idiosyncrasies between this with Iran and Iraq 23 years ago. It's the same thing all over again. They're coming up with these bullshit. Do you have any proof that people were trying to assassinate Trump? My proxies told me, and my proxies who I pay very handsomely to tell people that this is what is actually going on. No proof, no names, no nothing. Just trust me. I know what I'm talking about.
Trump is a great threat to Iran's plans to weaponize nuclear weapons and use them.
When did you tell President Trump you were going to launch these strikes?
Look, I've been in constant contact with President Trump. We've known each other for many years. And obviously, we informed our American friends and President Trump, our great friend, ahead of time. We did. He knew about it, of course.
Well, if he knew about it, Mr. War Criminal, wouldn't that make him an accessory to war crimes? To not actually step up and say, maybe you shouldn't do that. You totally shouldn't do that. It's a really bad idea. There's a part of me that isn't completely convinced that he told him that they were going to do it when they did it. He may have said, we may be launching an attack, and then just went ahead and did it anyway. There is nothing to trust with this man. Now, maybe it's bad lighting, but my God, that guy looks like a fucking ghost. Maybe he's dead already.
I mean, there were reports that President Trump kind of helped you achieve your strategic surprise by publicly urging you not to attack when he already knew you had decided to do it. So you were closely coordinating with the U.S. throughout this process.
Look, we're fully coordinated, but understand that America, under President Trump, will make the decisions that are best for America. And that's the way it is. He understands that I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, must make the decisions that are important for the survival of my country, and he will do what is best for America. That is a relationship of mutual respect and mutual confidence.
Yeah, sure. Well, he wasn't done. He decided to go on ABC News as well and spew his bullshit there.
Officials tell us that the president flatly rejected a plan, an opportunity that the Israelis had to take out the supreme leader. Do you understand his concern? My understanding is his concern is that this would escalate the conflict beyond where it is already.
It's not going to escalate the conflict. It's going to end the conflict. We've had half a century of conflict spread by this regime that terrorizes everyone in the Middle East, has bombed the Aramco oil fields in Saudi Arabia, is spreading terrorism and subversion and sabotage everywhere. That's the forever war is what Iran wants. And they're bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. In fact, what Israel is doing is preventing this, bringing an end to this aggression. And we can only do so by standing up to the forces of evil. Look, democracies have had to learn this lesson. You know, they faced a tyrannical regime, a radical, fanatic regime. For 40 years, I've been...
I'm telling you, it's like he's reading off of a goddamn teleprompter. But the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Netanyahu was suggesting that we should assassinate him. And of course, another regime change war, destabilization of the region, just like Iraq, same bullshit, telling him that the region will be forever greater as a result. Just pretend like you didn't see anything that's happened over the last 20, 25 years.
Thing. Actually, 3 years after the establishment of this radical Islamist Ayatollah regime in Tehran, I said that the greatest danger, not only to the survival of my country, but to the peace of the world, is Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons. And they are on the brink of achieving that. So imagine what they're doing now without nuclear weapons. Chanting death to America without nuclear weapons. Imagine what will happen if they had nuclear weapons and the ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles, to deliver it to every place on Earth. We're preventing the most horrific war imaginable, and we're bringing peace to the Middle East. And I believe that after our action, we're going to be able to bring the Middle East to new heights that nobody even imagined. You know, make the Middle East great again.
Does anybody buy this? I just want to know, anybody outside of the Zionist cult, does anybody actually buy any of this? Does anybody like this guy? Does anybody actually look into him and know the truth about what he's up to and why he's doing this? Anybody? And of course, it was even pointed out in the chat, no one's going to push back on him. No one's going to say, well, Mr. Prime Minister, that isn't exactly the truth. You are saying such and such. No, everyone understands that we are one nation under Israel blackmail. Period. But let's not forget that we've heard these stories before. We've heard the stories about a nation in the Middle East is trying to get a nuclear weapon or weapons of mass destruction, and we must invade and we must end their regime. Where have we heard that before? Here's where we heard it.
Information from a high-ranking Iraqi nuclear engineer who had defected revealed that despite his public promises, Saddam Hussein had ordered his nuclear program to continue. The evidence indicates that Iraq is reconstituting its nuclear weapons program. Saddam Hussein has held numerous meetings with Iraqi nuclear scientists, a group he calls his nuclear mujahideen, his nuclear holy warriors. Satellite photographs reveal that Iraq is rebuilding facilities at sites that have been part of its nuclear program in the past. Iraq has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes and other equipment needed for gas centrifuges, which are used to enrich uranium for nuclear weapons.
Do you think I'm capable of defining exactly what is a centrifuge if I was asked on the spot? I'm not sure about that. I'd have to think about it real hard.
If the Iraqi regime is able to produce, buy, or steal an amount of highly enriched uranium a little larger than a single softball, it could have a nuclear weapon in less than a year. And if we allow that to happen, a terrible line would be crossed. Saddam Hussein would be in a position to blackmail anyone who opposes his aggression. He would be in a position to dominate the Middle East. He would be in a position to threaten America. And Saddam Hussein would be in a position to pass nuclear technology to terrorists.
It almost sounds like if you replace Saddam with Netanyahu, it would still make a lot of sense. In fact, it would make total sense. It would actually explain the entire game perfectly. Everything he's saying about Saddam is actually what you should be saying about Netanyahu.
Some citizens wonder, after 11 years of living with this problem, why do we need to confront it now? And there's a reason. We've experienced the horror of September the 11th.
And there it is. Everything's about September 11th, just like everything's about October 7th. And repeat, rinse, repeat, do it over and over again, and continue to convince people that there is no other way. There is no peace. There is only war, endless war, because that's what makes us rich and powerful. And that's always been the modus operandi. It hasn't changed. We see it now, clear as day. The Iraq lie is now the Iran lie. Don't be fooled. Stand up. Be vigilant. It is a damn shame that the marches this weekend was against no kings when it should have been no war with Iran and a severing of the relationship with Israel. As I said, it's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen. It is inevitable. There is no coming back from this. And now the psychopathic behavior of this genocidal nation will not end. And I'll tell you why. Colin, I want you to grab that tweet that I sent you earlier regarding the initial attacks by Israel on Tehran. Big shout out to Thomas Massey. This is not our war. We should not engage our military here. Furthermore, doing so would require a vote from Congress. A big shout out to another political, who is a political lifer, unfortunately, but shout out to Senator Tim Kaine. He is bringing articles to the floor of the Senate for declaration of war, to actually get people on the record if we are going to get involved in any type of foreign conflict. Let me tell you something. There is enough chinks in the Trump armor right now that if this actually goes through, he might be in a lot of trouble. And if there's anything that I would want to see Trump impeached for, it would be for starting what could be a world war. That's justifiable impeachment. Much as it should have been for Obama, much as it should have been for Bush. That is how this works. Actual issues that should get leaders removed from power. This is no joke. This is the 11 o'clock hour. We are in deep doo-doo if we allow this to happen. Colin, can I have that other tweet, please? In the last, and this is Douglas MacGregor, ladies and gentlemen. In the last 72 hours, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Iran when negotiations between Washington and Tehran were still ongoing. Iran was caught off guard, but Iran recovered more quickly from its Pearl Harbor moment than Israel expected. In less than 18 hours after Israel's surprise attack, Iran responded, firing hundreds of ballistic missiles, including hypersonic missiles, into central Tel Aviv and across Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's Iron Dome failed. Israel intelligence failed. Now Netanyahu is pleading with Washington to intervene with American military power to rescue Israel from certain defeat, a defeat Netanyahu crafted with encouragement from Washington. At the same time, Russia, China, Pakistan, and most of the Muslim world are rallying to Iran's defense. Supplies, equipment, and technical assistance are pouring into Iran. It's time for a reality check. Washington's burned through 12 trillion with a T in the Middle East since 2003. Result, 7,000 dead Americans, 50,000 wounded, open borders, and 100,000 Americans dying yearly from fentanyl poisoning. Today, the U.S. is $37 trillion in debt. We'll X out that line on behalf of Steve Grumbine, a sum that does not include so-called agency debt. 77 million Americans voted for President Trump because he promised to end the overseas conflicts and halt the march to World War III. Trump's mandate is unchanged. Secure America's borders, ports, and coastal waters. Deport illegal aliens, crush the criminals, raping and murdering Americans, restore the rule of law, but not one more drop of American blood for foreign wars. One Israel strike on Karg Island, where 90% of Iran's oil exports flow, are Bandar Abbas terminals, and Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. That's 20% of global oil supply. That means disrupted supply chains and runaway inflation. Gas hits $7 a gallon overnight. Every working family crushed. Truckers can't deliver food. Economy crashes. For what? So Israel, that started this insane war, can drag Americans into a wider regional conflict with the potential for nuclear war? We have 40,000 troops in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, across the Persian Gulf. They are sitting ducks. Iranian Shahed 136 drones cost $20,000 each. American Patriot missiles cost $4 million to intercept. Do the math. We will run through our inventory of missiles and go broke while Americans come home in boxes. The Middle East is on the brink. Here's what Washington must do to defuse the conflict. Ask for an emergency UN Security Council meeting. Ask for immediate ceasefire, making it clear that Washington opposes the destruction of Iran, Israel, and any other state in the Middle East. Demand that Israel stop the killing of Palestinians in Gaza and withdraw its forces from Gaza and the West Bank. Number 3, suspend all military aid to Israel until Israel agrees to remove its troops from Gaza and permit humanitarian assistance to reach the people of Gaza. Number 4, propose the commitment of armed forces from non-aligned nations to police Gaza and the West Bank. Number 5, propose that the United States, Russia, China, India, and Brazil, BRICS, convene a peace conference to arbitrate the dispute between Israel, Iran, and Israel's neighbors. I led American soldiers under fire into action. I've seen plenty of flag-draped coffins. I don't want to see any more. Washington's warmongers have had 22 years. They failed, they lied, they profited, while America bled. Time's up. America first means America first. Not Israel first, not Ukraine first, not NATO first. America first. That is as succinct and effective a message as I have seen from any real leader. And obviously, Colonel MacGregor was a hell of a leader. And for him to say that, it really is an incredible, almost like a deposition that he's giving. But how much better and how much more can you articulate a point for people to understand just how bad this will get if we get involved with this shit on behalf of this fucking war criminal who should be in the fucking hang, who should be hung, drawn, and quartered for the entire public to see. The same for Smirnoff and the same for Gavir. And anybody else in this fucking country, whether it's Wasserman Schultz, whether it's Schumer, whether it's anybody who has been on board with this genocide and now are advocating for this war. And they're advocating for it, baby. And you know what's amazing about these people? They will never, ever lift a finger to defend this country. As I pointed out earlier about Ben-Gvir, same thing. Man never served in the IDF, which is usually a requirement when you're in Israel, unless under certain circumstances of exception. And then you don't have to serve. It's always the same people in this country who always scream the loudest for war, but they will never fight in it. They will never defend this country. And just so we're clear, their loyalty is not with the United States. Listen to anything Ben Shapiro has to say, that fuckwad. Everything is about Israel. Everything is about their religious indoctrination. This is what they believe, and they are not backing off of it. That is not changing. So we better get our shit together and get it together quickly, because this is going to get bad. Real fucking bad, real fucking fast. 40,000 troops are in 3 countries in the Middle East right now. And that's just standing army shit. And yet Trump's out there issuing orders. You totally have to get out of Tehran. You're not allowed there. Why don't you say, hey, to the U.S. troops, listen, we want to protect our troops. It's a very dangerous situation. They probably should not be there. No. Fuck this shit. And fuck anybody who supports it. They're not going to die for you. Fucking yahoos. You might be right. Maybe it is 90,000. It's probably 90,000 total. That we know of, Saul. We know of 900 bases. It's Probably bases we don't even know exist. And a lot of these bases, we don't even know where they are. The defense of this fucking person, the defense of this rogue nation, it's got to end, and it's going to end. It's just got to end faster than it's ending. It's not a question of if we will end our relationship with Israel. It's a question of when it's going to happen. We collectively all have to work together to make sure that it happens. And we have to do it fast. You can't even begin to imagine the type of pressure that the Israel lobby is putting on Trump right now to get involved, to formally get involved, to actually declare war on Iran on behalf of Israel. But if there is any salvageable part of Trump's soul where he pulls back and leaves Israel to fend for itself, it will break the Israel lobby's stranglehold over our country. It is this moment that can change the course of history. I don't know if there's a hashtag that makes sense to try to make go viral on social media. But if there's one thing we know about Trump, he does listen. He does care about what people think of him. And if people, especially of his coalition, are going to hate him and disparage him forever if he gets us involved in this, he might think twice about it. I hope that's what he's doing. I hope. But at this point, I don't know what type of faith I can really have. But hope is all we've got. I hope he does the right thing. We have had ourselves quite a bit of additional super chats. Got to give a shout out where shout out is due. Progressive Lefty, great to see you. Thank you so much for the $2.79 Canadian A. Bibi is beyond evil. We certainly agree. JG with the $2. Did Gaza want this? No, but they will not go silent. No, they will not go quietly into that good night. VA from New York. Thank you so much for the $10. Peter, you would love Steve's interview with Jay Cadman who was recruited and trained by AIPAC while in college. Macro and Cheese, episode 289, Deprogramming Hasbara. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. We try to bring on as many people and communicate with as many people that have either knowledge or experience directly with Israel. And that certainly is no exception. JG, thank you again for the $2. Evil is as evil does. Well, no argument from that. And JG, again, thank you for the 5 gifted generational change memberships. Appreciate all of it. JG, again with the $2. You are all Gazans. Hey, we all came from somewhere. It all had to start somewhere. K. Biscro, thank you so much for the $5. It would be interesting if you talked about the inside job theory with Norm when he is on. He has stated that he doesn't believe in it. Certain places, certain people don't want to go. I mean, I certainly believe that it was an inside job. That it was not necessarily that it was Hamas communicating with Israel. It's that the powers that be, led by Netanyahu, wanted it to happen. They knew it was going to happen, and they let it happen. Very similar to 9/11. Okay, Biscro with the $2. Thank you very much. And by the way, the Bibi Files is currently up on Odysee. I'm not familiar with that service, but if anybody wants to check out the Bibi Files, I highly recommend you get over there, give it a look. Extra medium, thank you very, very much for the $20. But isn't Netanyahu promising U.S. Iran's oil? Who the hell knows what he's promising? He's just trying to save his neck before it gets snapped. Because at this point, that's kind of what I think is going to happen. It's running out of real estate. S. Kolochuk, thank you for the 5 Canadian A, recommending a guest for this very good show. Mike Malloy. Guys, if you have any suggestions, and you would like to see us have certain guests, please do us a solid. Send an email over to generationalchange@gmail.com. We recommend any and all suggestions, anything that can help us continue to grow our channel out. We certainly appreciate it. Remember, if you are here this evening, to hit that like button if you're already subscribed. If you are not subscribed, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click that bell because it will remind you of when we go live so that way you can catch us. As you can imagine, we are a heavily suppressed channel. We are closing in on 30,000 subscribers. We're about to pass 29,100. Hopefully we will this evening. We would love to pass that number before Jen returns next Monday. On Thursday evening, we are going to have our friend Kit Cabello from Hard Lens Media. He will co-host with me. We'll have lots of wonderful topics to talk about. And then, of course, Jen will finally make her return this upcoming Monday. So we're a week away from Jen returning to Generational Change. She's been on the road having a wonderful time in Ireland, of course, a nation that truly understands the importance of standing on the side of true justice. They've been with the Palestinian people since the jump. JG 1982, again with the $2. Willie D, a black rapper, a community that agrees. Thank you very much, as always. And of course, as I said, any and all recommendations. Big shout out, as always, to Brett Boyle, who does an amazing job moderating our channel. Any and all assistance can obviously be tremendously appreciated. Ozma, thank you so much for the $10. You did great, Peter, doing Jen proud while she's gone. I do what I can, guys. I do what I can. We'll definitely see. It is pretty clear that Monday nights are a little tougher. The highest I think we got to tonight was about 240. I'm going to cover one more small story before we go. And remember, you could always go over to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. You could become a supporter of our small but mighty and growing channel. As I said, we are on the upward swing, and we are looking forward to more and more growth. And we're extremely appreciative for each and every one of you that are here this evening. So we would be amiss to not talk about Vance Boelter, who, as you guys know, did apparently assassinate a couple of elected officials in the state of Minnesota. Mortman, I think. I don't want to mispronounce her name. Katie. I don't want to. Again, I'm going to wait for somebody in the audience to tell me who the name of the politician. You know, the funny thing about all of this, and this is what makes this particular story sad in so many ways, is that people are debating whether or not this guy, Vance Boelter, is a Democrat or a Republican. What? This is when you know things have gotten so fucking bad. It's not about who got assassinated. It's not about that. Win some, lose some, right? No, it's about which side of the political aisle does this person fall under? Because that's what matters. So that we can use it as political cannon fodder, not talk about the fact that this country's falling apart and that politicians should really be watching their fucking back at this point because they're not doing anything to solve to make our lives any better. In fact, they're making it worse. But what I want to point out, because this is important. Oh, he made his attitudes clear, all right. I'm going to show you guys a clip that many of you probably haven't seen. You see, this guy is a religious nut job. So let's just put that into the equation. As I said, we must have the separation of church and state. Right now, we don't have that. So this apparently is Mr. Vance Boelter at what appears to be some type of a religious revival event at a Baptist church.
This earth. Il n'y a rien d'autre ici sous terre. All the riches of this world. Toutes les richesses de ce monde can fill a heart. Ne peuvent pas remplir nos cœurs. Because you were made by God. Parce que tu as été créé par Dieu. You were made for God. Tu as été créé pour Dieu. even in the heavens above,
même dans le ciel là-haut,
where all the angels roam,
tous les anges là au ciel.
Some say Satan was over the head of worship.
D'autres disent que Satan était le numéro 1 de l'adoration.
He was the highest of high in the heavens.
Il était l'ange le plus élevé au ciel.
Underneath God.
Je n'ai pas besoin de ça.
Was that enough?
Est-ce que ça, ce n'était pas suffisant pour lui?
Was that enough?
Est-ce que ça, c'était pas suffisant pour le diable?
No.
Non.
He said, I want to be higher.
Il voulait devenir encore plus.
I want more.
Je voudrais plus encore.
If you don't have the word of God,
si tu n'as pas la parole de
you
Dieu,
will never be happy on
tu ne
this earth.
seras jamais heureux ici sur terre.
Even in the heavens above,
même là au ciel,
you could be the highest angel.
Tu peux être l'ange le plus élevé.
And if you're not content with the word of God,
mais si tu n'es pas
Yeah, I think he's nuts. I think they're all nuts. But he especially. Yeah. Or some form of psychosis, I would say. But that being said, there's some more information about Mr. Boelter.
This last 5 minutes, David Carlson, who says he was Vance Boelter's best friend, has known him since 4th grade, one of his two best friends. He was sitting here right on these front steps reading the very last text message from Vance Boelter he received in the 6 o'clock hour, 6 a.m. this morning. I'm going to read some of the words, and he read aloud in tears that text message, and I'll read you some of those words minus some of the filler words. He said, I'm gonna be gone for a while. Again, these are the words of Vance Boelter. I may be dead shortly, so I just want to let you know, I wish it hadn't gone this way. I don't want to say anything more. You guys don't know anything about this. I love you guys, and I'm sorry for all the trouble this has caused. Again, this was David Carlson reading aloud to members of the media, including us right here, telling us the very last text message he received from his best friend, Vance Boelter, in the 6 a.m. hour. Now, take a look at the scene here behind me. You see his roommate, again, David Carlson, who was reading that text message. His best friend also lives here in this house with Vance Boelter. He and another roommate corroborated that Vance Boelter lived in this home just a couple times in the week, his other home being in Green Isle. He had some jobs here in the Twin Cities, and so that's why he was here. In fact, actually, this room on the right, you see somebody inside there right now. There's a cat tower in the front. The window's clearly busted out. That is the room where Vance Boelter lived. David Carlson, his roommate, went inside for us when I asked him, hey, can you show us that book he wrote? Apparently, he had written a book about the church, and that overall, he was a very good guy. His roommates, his friend, clearly just dumbfounded at the events that have happened today and the events that are now being linked to their roommate. David Carlson could not walk out with any book that he was talking about, and that was because police had already come and gone, and they had taken a lot of his items.
And as I mentioned, what people are trying to debate now is what side of the political aisle did this guy fall under? He apparently registered as a Republican last. There hasn't been anything definitive about his support for Trump, but that he apparently worked for Governor Walz. I think his wife worked for him. And at the end, who cares what should be talked about? First, that this guy's obviously religiously inclined. I'm not even going to say he's nuts. I'm just going to say that this is what happens when people get indoctrinated by religion. And then you take it a step further and you realize that there is a level of desperation that people are going through in this country. And it's only getting worse. And our elected officials are making it worse, in many cases on purpose. Now, I don't know this lady who's the Speaker of the House in the Minnesota State House of Representatives. It is terrible and unfortunate that it did. And the state of Minnesota has actually done some pretty good work in terms of progressive legislation. But I'm surprised that there isn't more political violence in this country. I'm actually surprised it's not worse than this. And who's to say it won't get worse? But you can only squeeze so many people so tight. I know a lot of people in the chat thinks that this is an MK Ultra special, and maybe it is. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it is. But what I am saying is that you can still put two and two together. You can put together the reality that this guy was obviously disturbed just based on the surface level of his religious implications. And then you can recognize the level of violence that is happening and that this is just the beginning. That's what this is. This is the beginning. This isn't the end because nothing's changing. People's ability to survive is becoming materially impossible. And at some point, they're going to take their frustrations out on the people who are likely causing that pain. So while I'm not justifying it, you can understand why it's happening. It's really not hard to see it. We should all be aware that this is how bad things are getting. Vance was caught, but apparently he surrendered. It isn't even so much that he was captured, it's that he kind of gave himself up. It's only out for a couple of days, but I would be curious to know why that was the case. In the end, it's a very precarious moment that we're living in right now. All these stories that we see, all these issues that we deal with on a regular basis. This is going to become more fast, more furious as we go forward. That's what's happening here. And I worry and I have deep concerns about how much worse this can get. I sure hope it doesn't. But I do know that as desperate as these times are, as I often say, the night is darkest before the dawn. And while a lot of people are scared and concerned right now, there's also a great awakening that I think is happening amongst a lot of people. I believe that. And so I am appreciative of all of you that are here this evening. I would implore all of you to try to maintain as positive an attitude about everything that's going on as you can. I know it's hard. But remember, we only have each other. So remember to smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit that bell. Make sure you share the stream. And I am very grateful, even on a night where we don't get the same numbers as Saturday. I'm grateful that we have an audience that enjoys our content and wants to be here, even for 3 hours, probably longer than I would have anticipated. And there were some topics that we didn't get to tonight, but we will get to on Thursday. And that's the beauty of our show. And that's why you guys are here, all of you guys. For everyone that supports us, and whether it's Ghislaine, Evil Tricky Spider, Shunt Guy, Katie Cat, THX. I always love running through the names if I can. Public Domain, Macrograms, Denise Columbia, Schultze, Solgood, Dwayne Vogel, Zaynep, Arachnu, Josie Justice, Wanker Tanker, Sarah R., Calling Larry, Piano Man, David Hunter, Donna Vance, Travers, of course. Get the idea. As Brett Boyle says, don't forget the likes. We thank you all. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We love you all. We'll see you Thursday, and free Palestine.